everybody, and welcome to the Transatlantic Call-In Show. This is a show where you get to call in and talk to two real trans people, silly term, about anything and everything trans related. So if you maybe have some philosophical question about the nature of like what is a woman and you want to talk about that, or if you want to talk about any of the other popular trans things that you hear on the media and the news, now is your opportunity to talk to yourself, two trans people, about this topic. And we are two trans people who are pretty well informed on everything from trans and queer history to like the medical basis. My guest here is a doctor. This is Dr. Ben. Dr. Ben, say hi.
Hey, what's up? You all know me by now, I hope.
Yeah, I say guest. You're a host here. You're on the payroll.
Yeah, I'm getting demoted. It's like, how did I do that bad at Jackbox last night? Even though I won quite a bit at Jackbox last night.
Yeah, you were pretty slaying with the.
I know, I made Jimmy mad. I mean, granted, I got a lot of wins because I threw Jimmy under the bus. So
honestly, what better way to get wins than throwing Jimmy under the bus? So, if you guys are new here, the number is 720-619-2288. We do have a call-in queue, so you're not going to get on the line right away. But we have a few callers, and there are a few open lines. So if you want to get in, go ahead and dial that number right now. So just a few more things ahead of the normal schedule, only because, first of all, happy holidays, everyone. I hope you are having at the very least, tolerable holiday season, if not an enjoyable one. For those of you who are maybe don't get to enjoy the comfort of a living family to go home to, I relate. I have a loving partner, but yeah, family is a little more complicated. So, we over here at the line are doing our annual holiday mug competition where we get to design a mug for all of the hosts on the line, who responded to my text messages, and there's only a few that got left out, and it's only because their response rates are low. And whoever sells the most of their mug design ends up getting to have their mug design turned into full merch. So they're going to be merch that's available throughout the year. And then for all the other mugs, if we sell as many as 2,000 total mugs, big stretch goal, then all the mugs designs will be available for the rest of the month of January. But after that, they're going away forever. So now is the time to get them. And we're going to show you real quick mine and Ben's mugs. Mine is the Leave Trans People the Fuck Alone mug. And Ben, you want to talk about yours a little?
Yeah, it's a play on, obviously it's a play on Doctors Without Borders, but it's healthcare without binaries. I put healthcare instead of doctors just to make it more applicable because there are more healthcare workers. There's more to this than just doctors. So it's giving a shout out to all the people working very, very hard in healthcare to make it more accessible and more inclusive, but also sending a message that gender and gender identity should not be used as a basis to deny people access or deny people healthcare services. So it's also, I know it's less explicit than a lot of the other mug options, but in a way, it's nice in terms of activism. You can take this more places, take this to work, especially if you work in a healthcare field. I think it's great to kind of spread the message along that healthcare should be inherently inclusive. So
I
definitely get
totally agree. Honestly, I think you have a great general message, and I think that's kind of that was a complaint we got last year, and like I love the designs they did for like Shannon Q and Paulogia's mugs, right? But it is so niche to this audience and people who love them in this audience because it is about their coffee table beef, which if you don't know, I'm not explaining it right now. There are videos you can go back and watch on this. But yeah, I think these two mugs are really good because they kind of have general appeal. Also, we are going to be doing, normally at the end of the show, we read out all super chats over $5. And we have a competition where super chats that have a hashtag Team Arden or hashtag Team Ben, whoever gets the least amount of votes has to defend a silly position, and we're changing that up today. So the way this is going to work is that if Ben wins, meaning I have to defend a position. The position will be that Baldur's Gate 3 is the best game that's ever existed. And if Ben loses and I win, Ben will have to defend the position that Baldur's Gate 3 is the worst game that's ever existed. This is mostly for Ben and my own enjoyment. One of us is going to have a hilarious cackle throughout the debate at the end. And the only other thing we're adding today is that purchases of either mine or Ben's mugs will count as points to the total score. So if you want to participate, but you don't want to send a super chat, this is another way to directly support the line that is like really like efficient at, we get slightly more of this money take home.
And you get a mug. And you get a mug out of the deal.
Right.
Like it's the same price of the mug as it normally would be, but now it can sway the vote. So
exactly. So if you were thinking of sending a $19.99 super chat anyway, maybe save that and go get a mug for, I think it's like $14.20 or something is the purchase price. No, Sophie Dawson, you're confused. Ben does like Baldur's Gate 3. That's the problem. I don't, and Ben does, and so we're making each other defend the position we don't hold.
Yeah.
We will. I'll probably check through. We'll probably how we're gonna do this. Let me look at where we are right now for each of our solds, so that way I can keep track as we go.
And then we can add those at the very end, like after the super chats are done, and that can be our little tiebreaker, I guess.
Here we go. Okay. I need a little notes app thing out. So I'm starting with 52 sales. That's not 52 points. It's going to be sales that happen over the course of this live show are going to be what counts towards it. So I'm just trying to remember where the starting number I have is so that we can add those points. Wait, what was your mug called, Ben? You gave it some weird name, didn't you?
Oh, it was something Venus. Something hazard, something receptacle.
That's why it's not coming up. You called it a Venus. I do love the Venus inside joke. Here we go. Okay, Ben is starting with 5. So now I have a foundation. So any new sales starting after now with that count are going to count towards our total points at the end of super chats. So yes, if you don't already have a mug, or if you do and you just want to support the line, and you want to vote in the competition, this is one way you can do that. No need to have super hashtag in the thing. I will count them either way. Okay, so we're gonna look real quickly at last week's poll, discuss it for a minute, and then we'll read next week's poll or this week's poll. I'll put it in chat and we'll get to our first call. So hopefully we'll be on that first call here shortly. I do see that lines are filling up. So last week's poll was, should kids shows be allowed to include queer and trans characters? And this kind of came off the back of Pixar removing an episode of a show with a character who was trans, and there was this whole like bathroom scene of the kid kind of not knowing where to go, and then when they went in feeling like they looked like there was like this like Picasso-esque distortions of their face in the mirror, and like they felt out of place, and it was a really good trans allegory, and they removed it. And so we're kind of just discussing the nature of like, should kids shows be allowed to include queer people and trans characters in general? And not even saying they ought to, just should they be allowed? And I'm going to be honest, while 90% yes makes perfect sense, 10% no, I find shocking. Like 10% of you think that queer and trans characters shouldn't be allowed at all. That's kind of wild.
Especially if you 10% are in the free speech is good camp, then this is an example of free speech. Like if you were a private company and you're putting out like a media production, you should be allowed to include those characters like as part of your like freedom of the press, freedom of speech, all that stuff. You care about that shit. Why are you voting no?
I didn't look through most of the comments on this, but this just feels like really resonant of like, if you don't know the gay liberation movement kind of back in like the 70s and stuff, one of the big figures who led the charge against it was someone called Anita Bryant. And she kind of popularized this notion of, since queer people can't reproduce, they have to recruit new candidates. And so I think a lot of the pushback on things like queer and trans characters in media is this notion of recruiting. But like, it's baffling, and this shouldn't need to be said. I feel like this should be just so accessible to everyone readily. But like, I saw nothing but straight cis propaganda my whole life of men grow up to be this kind of men, women grow up to be this kind of women, and they fall in love and they make out, and they're cartoon characters all the time on shows. But for some reason, when they're queer or trans, it's now propaganda, it's now recruitment, it's now trying to shove things down somebody's throat. Very strange, and I don't. It's hard for me to even know how to combat that, because it seems so detached from reality that I'm like, I don't even know where to start to help you unpacking that kind of mindset.
Right. It sounds like the perspective that trans people are inherently sexually deviant. And like,
Yeah.
we're not asking to feature sexual acts in kid shows. Like, we're asking, like, should it be okay for a trans person, again, with the bathroom thing? Like, the person just wanting to be in the right place for themselves, and that's not sexual. Like, and it's funny, like, how a lot of people will say that all of this is woke, like, or diversity is so woke. It's like, comparing this to like inclusion of any minority character, like, tends to have people going the same direction of like, why do you have a black character in your show? Like, why do you got to be so woke? Like, how is representation of a person of color on your show, like, how is that woke? Like, how is that any different than just having any other character with any other backstory, any other, like, it doesn't make sense to me, like, why people are so upset by a person existing on a show.
Yeah, it's like, you don't even have to consume the show. You don't have to watch it. You don't have to let anyone watch it. It's the rage so much that it exists that you try to prevent the company through public outcry from putting it forward. That is what's like, doesn't make any sense. And kind of like you're saying, like, so detached from this notion of like free speech, which the right loves to claim is their big thing. Also, there's been a movement, kind of, it seems tangentially related to Humanists United against what is it? Oh, I can't remember. It's the organization Andrew Seidel works for, Secular Humanists Against whatever, who's been doing a big thing on this whole First Amendment thing. Means the First Amendment is your right to not want to watch a trans character on a TV show, and to be trans, and to have a trans character on a TV show. It is both things. And so, if you're going to espouse free speech, I think you should at least be consistent with it. But anyway, we're going to touch real quickly on this week's poll, and I'm going to put up the live chat, and then we will come back to this later and kind of discuss it more depth. Do you want to read this one, Ben? This is yours.
Yeah. So this one says, has your media consumption, including news, social media, etc., increased or decreased or stayed the same following the 2024 presidential election? So this isn't a super complicated question. I know some people are going to try to make this complicated. It's just getting at the idea of, have you been online more? Have you been going to news sources more? Have you been trying to take a break from all that? Just, is it more? Is it less? Is it the same? Give us your feedback on that.
Awesome. And that is going to be all of our initial housework to do before we bring on our first caller. So what do you say, Ben? You ready to talk to someone?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Let's talk to maybe Siobhan in British Columbia. Siobhan, you are live on Transatlantic with Arden and Dr. Ben. Talk to us. What's going on?
Hey, Arden. Hey, Dr. Ben. I called last week, remember, Arden?
Yes, I do. Yep.
Because it was the medical stuff I was wanting to talk to, and you said call back when Ben was on. So,
Perfect.
I know that there are facts about muscle mass loss when transitioning from females or from male to female. and not only that, there's the bone density and lung capacity and stuff. So that's why, because the biggest thing is about trans athletes are having it just drives me nuts.
Yeah. So what's since I wasn't listening last week, can you just tell me what the specific question is or the specific argument?
Well, the thing is, trans women in sports, in my opinion, don't necessarily have as much of a biological advantage as they say, as the right wing says they do.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
And it's so it's in addition to the Air Force study that I'm sure was cited last week. In addition to all that, like one of my favorite arguments to use is that athleticism isn't just about strength and muscle mass and bone mass. And the sportsmanship is even different than that. Like if you consider, like people consider chess a sport, does chess require the same type of athleticism that, marathon running does? No, it doesn't. Like, so why are we applying the same standards of advantage to a chess match or a darts match to like marathon running or weightlifting? And that's just a generalization of what sports is, and that's I think if people don't take into account things like agility, they don't take into account strategy, training, for certain things like weight cutting is a huge thing that can impact your performance. A lot of that goes into play without even having to go to, and even like weight, like size, going back to the weight cutting thing. Like I say all the time, it's probably more fair in a lot of combat sports to have a 130-pound cis woman go up against a 130-pound cis man than to have that same woman go up against a 160-pound woman. And it's just I think along with the, more scientific proof arguments, like just breaking down the talking points that imply that sports have the same requirements across the board when they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I was just going to add that while I think, I appreciate you calling in, Siobhan, and wanting to talk to Ben about maybe more sort of medical, biological sort of elements of this question, I don't even necessarily think it's necessary to get into that question. I think a lot of the people who bring this topic up are usually doing it in pretty bad faith to begin with. And so part of the thing that I kind of like to jump into is just discussing that, like, categorical bans on an entire group of people for participation in something is probably always going to fail to accomplish fairness. Like I forget, there's a word for this in legal sort of speak that refers to like the tendency for a law to it tries to accomplish its goal, but it does so in the most cumbersome way possible. Like, sure, maybe to some sense you are achieving fairness, but you are doing so by excluding lots of people who don't have an unfair advantage. And so to the extent that you're achieving fairness, you're doing it very poorly. And I think it's also worth pointing out that even if we remove trans people from this equation entirely, right, we have the same standards that we have currently for trans women to participate in sports, where it's like you have to have a certain amount of, testosterone per nanomoles per deciliter or whatever the fuck, according to like IOC guidelines or something, right? That it ends up excluding cis women, like Caster Semenya, women who might have some sort of differences of sex development. And yet...
Women with PCOS.
Yeah, women with PCOS is another good example. And yet there's no similar principle for men, where it's like, oh, if you have a certain, some genetic anomaly, some biological anomaly that gives you an unfair advantage, you aren't allowed to participate, which seems really strange to me. For men, the ceiling is whatever's possible. It is never ending. But for women, the second you cross a certain line, now you're being unfair. Now you're no longer even really a woman. Now you're actually approaching the category of being a man. It is this like weird desire to keep the category of women constrained within these very specific bounds, but having no such boundaries on men. It seems like such an unequal distribution of, like, application of fairness to begin with, even if trans people are completely removed from the question. So I think it's sometimes better to, when you're having these conversations, hone in on, don't get me wrong, this is valuable too. And if you're talking to someone who you think is good faith, talk about the biological differences. It's a valid, interesting part. I was just trying to say that usually when people call in about this topic, I can point them to all the facts in the world, and they're still going to go, yeah, but men are stronger. It's not going to hit a wall in their head.
Yeah, the goal is, the goal for them is to keep women small. Like that's the goal. Like, and I've seen in jiu-jitsu even a lot of cis women who have thrown their hat in the ring and gone into men's divisions. And oftentimes, if that woman does well, they will come up with some kind of excuse for why she was the exception. They'll be like, oh, well, she's too big, or like she didn't want to be in like a highest women's weight category, so like went into the men's division instead and stuff, and like she just sat on them. Like they'll make really, really bad excuses to try to invalidate that woman's accomplishment. Even when, like, I've seen that happen with one of the women I saw in a men's division was a very small cis woman. And she didn't win all the rounds. Like, she absolutely crushed it. But people would take that as like, oh, well, she didn't win the whole category, therefore she shouldn't compete against men. Like, but most men aren't going to win against every other, because only one can win. Only one can take gold. So like, why does she have that super high standard, but they don't? Yeah, it's all misogyny. It's all rooted in misogyny.
Oh, I mean, when it comes to the judo, I expect the women to actually have an advantage because you're utilizing your opponent's mass, strength, and stuff against them. It's like, so, but
I mean, to an extent, the weight categories do matter a lot in grappling sports. But yeah, it gives them probably one of the best chances to compete in a men's division. But either way, like, it's their barrier isn't because they're a woman. The barrier is because they'd be in a weight class that's unfair to them. And like, that's the same thing if you put trans women in the fair weight class for them. And like, most of them, their weight class is going to go down after starting hormones. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The other thing too is the IOC was right to let Amani Khalif compete because the country she was in, the laws are so restrictive that transition is death. So
Amani Khalif was not transgender, despite the fact that Sam Harris still said so on his podcast like a month ago, that Richard Dawkins still said so on Twitter like a month ago. Like, despite the fact that many skeptics, alleged skeptics, I should say, within the atheist, like, broader community, still tout this lie, there's no evidence to support it. There is like one competition from a Russian agency who had a vested interest in preserving the reputation of like their best athlete, who claimed it, but they didn't provide any evidence to back up their claim. There's no actual biological evidence of Amani Khalif being transgender at all. And by the way, like you were pointing out, Siobhan, in this country, there's a lot of prejudice and bigotry towards queer people. I don't know Amani Khalif. I'm not going to speak to like what her deeply held beliefs are, but like it wouldn't surprise me to find out that her or like people close to her think very poorly of trans people. And so it's like kind of wild to me to like have to show up and defend somebody who could ostensibly, I don't know, have weird feelings about trans people because she's being called trans, but like it's because, this is the standard of morality that we're trying to put forward. Like, it shouldn't matter where you come from, what like religion is popular in your area and how that may have affected your beliefs, or, what biological influences you should have. Athleticism is like the meritocracy, right? It is the true, like, you fight and compete, and if you're good, you win. This is like what they're trying to make it. And I think it's sad that we want to put a ceiling over women, but for men, we like cut the chains loose. It's
As long as, if you're a man, as long as your steroids are not detected, you're good.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I did a lot of research before I started my transition, and because some of the early reports were that a trans woman could lose up to 30% of their upper body strength. So,
Yeah, I felt that personally too. I've cited before, like, granted, part of this is also just age, and I don't work out, but like when I was early 20s before I transitioned, I was able to like hop up on a pull-up bar and do 10 like nothing. Like it, even when I wasn't working out actively, it was really easy for me to just kind of do that. I can't do that at all now because testosterone like does affect those things, right? And it's there's so much nuance to this that is not captured by the approach of ban all trans women unilaterally from women's sports, and like they kind of want to ban trans men, but then there's like a malicious compliance that trans men can do that make them go, well, okay, maybe you guys just shouldn't compete at all. It's very frustrating, and it's not rooted in really fairness or like biological science in any meaningful way. Yeah,
I know.
Anyway, Siobhan, thank you for calling back. Hopefully you kind of got what you were looking for. Is there anything else you want to add before we take the next caller?
Nope, just thanks for being here and talking. I enjoyed coming in to watch and chat, so.
Awesome. Thank you so much for calling, Siobhan. I appreciate it. You have a lovely day.
You too.
Right. That is the first caller of the day. Done. Nice and easy. I think that's an interesting conversation. I would love to talk to someone who's maybe like involved in sports research and that kind of stuff and pick their brain about this, because I feel like it's pretty hard to deny like the complexity of biology, and that things that might be true of a population generally speaking are not going to be true of individuals. And so having these like unilateral rules is kind of always going to create problems that aren't necessary if we can evaluate people on an individual basis. In a sport basis, again, like, why are we using these arguments to regulate chess? Like the fact that chess has gone on this bandwagon, like why are you rating chess like the same way? Like, I don't care what your upper body muscle mass is in chess. I don't think anybody cares. I know there's some criticism to be had of the Botez sisters. I think they have some cringe takes on social media from some time, but don't we all? One thing I really appreciate about Alexandra Botez is that she's got this thing about like, I will not do a women's grandmaster tournament. I'm going to like, if I do one, it's going to be like a proper open tournament. I mean, like, I don't know. It's nice that we have like these areas that are carved out to try to give women the representation to like thrive and succeed, and I think that's really valuable too. But I also just appreciate someone who's like, no, I'm not, like, I don't need the participation trophy. Like, I am perfectly capable of playing along, the fullest of my extent, and I think that's cool. All right, we're going to talk to Mila, who pronouns are she, her, in Colorado, who says, would you consider calling trans women feminine men dehumanizing? I feel like this should be a really short call, but Mila, you are live on Transatlantic with Arden and Ben. What's going on?
Hi, thank you for having me. I was curious. I've heard this like as a common criticism of like from gender critical perspectives that basically calling a trans woman a feminine man isn't dehumanizing. And as someone that supports trans people, I was curious, I think a lot of times we fall into a trap where like people who defend trans inclusion come from a ideological perspective, and the opponents seem to come at it from a like scientific perspective. And I was curious how we could like combat some of these criticisms against trans inclusion from a scientific perspective that also includes, that doesn't like alienate allies of trans people?
Well, I mean, I think that I don't think that we don't come at it from a scientific perspective. I think what happens
I
is
agree.
the anti-trans position isn't updated on their science. They're claiming a scientific perspective that is way overly simplified and dumbed down and incorrect. Whereas
I
we
couldn't agree
understand
more.
that science is complex and that you can't narrow it down to just the scientific perspective. So we include a humanistic perspective in with it. And as far as your question goes, yeah.
I was going to say, because identity is fundamentally biological. I mean, our brains aren't, they're not like ideological. They are fundamentally like biologically based. And one criticism I have of the gender critical movement is that they seem to acknowledge all sex differences in, like, all sexual dimorphic differences in men and women until it comes to the brain. And I agree that, like, we're not, it's not that the people supporting trans aren't doing it from a scientific perspective. I just mean that, like, the way that the conversation is framed, at least by kind of mainstream discussion, it definitely frames, they tend to strawman trans allies by saying that we are putting ideology over, the ideology of, well, if someone feels that way, like,
I think part of the problem is exactly what you're talking about, is this sort of straw man thing where a lot of the people who are talking about, a lot of people have criticisms like self-ID, for example. I already know there's going to be like a portion of our audience who just groan because they hate self-ID. But the problem is it's framed as this notion of like trans people are, doing an invocation where we're casting a spell with our words, that by the virtue of saying I'm a woman, that is what makes me a woman. When really what we're talking about is, much in the same way that you have to self-ID as right or left-handed, or self-ID as in pain, I don't have access to what's in your brain. And so the most reliable way for me to know if you're trans is for you to tell me that you are trans. And so it's not that the self-ID is what makes you a woman. There is some fact of the matter about our brain, about our psychology, our biology, and how those things are so deeply interwoven as a social species. That is the fact of the matter that makes you a man or a woman. And the fact that we can't point to a specific cluster of neurons is not a problem unless you also think that's a problem for the experience of pain and right or left-handedness or your favorite flavor of ice cream. All of those things are nebulous elements of, uncontroversially, our biology, our brain, our internal experience of the world. But we don't spend a lot of time talking about, the frauds going to the ice cream shop ordering vanilla just so they can get access to the little kids ordering chocolate. Like, that's, not something you hear about on the news, but you do hear this about trans people in this like very fraudulent way. And I think, I think it really is kind of like you were both saying, this sort of out of date straw manned representation of the trans position. We also, like we covered last week on the Hang Up when I was on with Matt, Sam Harris's recent podcast right after the election, where he talked about how it's a thought crime if you don't think that a trans woman is a woman, a specific one. And it's like, who's enforcing this thought crime? I would love to know, because I'm going to guess it's no one. And you're allowed to think anyone is whatever you want, because nobody gives a shit what you personally think. It's just, we're saying like, hey, if you call me a man, I don't want to be around you. It makes me feel like shit, and it's rude and dehumanizing in my view. And when I'm around people who are aware of trans issues and aware of the facts of the matter, they treat me with respect and dignity. I don't need to know what they think about me personally in their head to know that, like, I'm treated like a human. I feel respected.
There's no scientific way to define the parameters of any word. You can't do a scientific experiment to say that this is the right way to prove that this should be the definition of a planet or a fish or a woman. So
and if you take that and if you take that perspective, like we talk about many times, you would have to move the goalpost like
Mhm.
through infinity in order to clearly define woman or man based on biological characteristics, because like there is no single definition that encompasses every person that would even fit the definition of cis woman. So like
Right. Even
I
the
think that's
definition
it's a straw
of
man, but it's also like the goalpost has to be moved unless you allow for self ID.
right. And to bring it back to the original question I have, which is why would some proponents would suggest that we are respecting self ID by saying that you aren't a woman, but that you're feminine. You're just a feminine man because the biology that defines your biological sex should be the sex of your body, not the sexually dimorphic characteristics of brain development, or patterns of brain development more specifically. So how do you think we could address that critique from a scientific perspective that demonstrates why a trans person would consider that characterization dehumanizing?
I mean, I don't know if there's a scientific way to frame that particular question of like why somebody would think something is dehumanizing. I don't know if that's the right, like, because that is inherently a humanistic question.
Yes.
But I think that like chasing them around with them moving the goalpost is a great way to get to a point of science that people often forget or just are not aware of. There's this idea that science is like 100% certainty or near 100% certainty in something. And that's not the case. And medicine especially is not the case. A lot of times it is what is useful, like what knowledge is useful. It is not this never ending trail of philosophy to like the ultimate answer. Like, again, that's philosophy. Like there's a point, like there's a fun exercise in saying, I want to know everything that is, I want to know everything that could be, I want to know all the possibilities. Science really, in academia, it can be like that, but that's their job, is to research. In medicine or in applied science, it's not the job. The job in applied science is to work with what you have in the reality that we have and to make, humanity do better. And so there's a lot of things that I'm okay not knowing the answer on. And like that is standard practice to not know the answer. Some great examples are especially with like laboratory testing of like primarily upper respiratory infections. Even like people get frustrated if their doctor doesn't order a strep test for them when they feel like they should have it. But in all honesty, for the majority of people that are above a certain age or do not meet other criteria, even having that answer, even if it's positive, does not mean you're going to get antibiotics. It does not mean we're going to go forward with a different management. Same thing, like with if you had a cold, and there are how many different viruses out there that can cause a cold. I don't need to know which one you have, because I'm going to, either way, you're not getting admitted to the hospital. You're going to go home. I'm going to tell you to do the same exact things. You're not going to be around people. Like, so why do I need that extra step of information? Like, sure, you could do it, but it's not changing anything. And it's the same thing with trans people. Like, what is the next step to absolutely confirm that somebody has whatever in their pants? I don't think any of us are going to go in that direction. I don't think any of us are going to say you have to. I mean, some people are wanting to do that, but even so, you're going to have to chase them down in their moving the goalpost, because you'll say, okay, are you in favor of genital inspections before like sports tournaments? And a lot of them will say, yeah, we actually are in favor of that. Okay, but how are you going to capture the people that like have ambiguous anatomy or have anatomy that does not line up with their chromosomes? Because gender criticals will say, oh, but it's the chromosomes, not the anatomy. Okay, so then are you going to karyotype everybody? Okay, but then are you also going to make sure that they're like are you going to start gamete sampling everybody before they go on a sporting tournament? Or are you going to gamete sample everybody before you call them sir or ma'am? Like there's a point where it's not useful anymore.
Don't have gametes as well. Like it's such a silly way to define it, because then you're erasing the biological sex of people that don't produce gametes and are still clearly male or female. I do have a background in genetics. Is it okay if I speak to the chromosome, or kind of explain why the chromosome argument is kind of an example of like this overly simplified science?
Yeah, and I think Forrest and I talk about that particular thing a lot too.
Yeah, if you don't mind keeping it a little bit concise. I realize we talk a lot,
Absolutely.
but yeah, you can, sure.
Well, the genetic blueprint for operating as male or female is universally in all organisms. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep it concise.
Sure. No problem.
Half of every chromosome comes from a male, and half of every chromosome comes from a female. Whether the shape is X or Y. I think one thing that is often left out that people with a more genetic understanding of human biology find intuitive is that like genotype and phenotype are very universal. So just to make it concise with a quick analogy, it's like if someone puts in blue contacts, you're not saying that, oh, I naturally biologically have blue eyes, but if someone has a parent that has a blue eye and you're able to take medication that expresses the epigenetic plasticity in your genotype so that your eyes naturally turn blue, you could say it's erasing blue eye biology to deny that person now has blue eyes just because they have to take medication that expresses that particular phenotype. So the same process that produced gametes also shows that half of every chromosome comes from a male and half from a female. So it's very different from identifying as an attack helicopter or a cat, because people don't have half of their DNA inherited from a cat. It's a commonly oversimplified analogy, and it's why I would say that
that's an interesting argument. You provided a very interesting perspective, though, and I need to start using that more.
I really like that as well. So thank you for that, Mila. And I also think it's important to talk about like when they say, this erases like, blue eye biology or something, like why do we say that, something or an action or a person erases a group? Like usually we're talking about, it's kind of like a bit of a stolen valor kind of point. Like you are sort of undermining the oppression that people in this group have faced by doing something, right? So the implication is sort of that by adopting womanhood and adopting like female phenotypes, that we are somehow undermining the oppression that women have faced. But if you are a trans person who has experienced transition, particularly trans women, although this is totally relatable for trans men too, I'm sure, just in a very inverse way, like I started experiencing misogyny. Like I started experiencing the oppression that cis women have faced, right? It's not like it didn't go away. I just became a recipient of it. Like it didn't go anywhere for anyone. It just suddenly, now I'm being included in, being ignored in certain conversations and things like this. So it's the notion that anyone is being erased by us adopting like a female phenotype or whatever you want to call it is very silly and not evident at all. Like I understand where they're coming from, because there is like this sort of rad femme perspective of like viewing women as like the sex class that is oppressed by the patriarchy. It is sort of like this conception of it, and there is a lens through which using that I think is valuable, like especially when we're like looking at media and things like this. But to think that it applies universally for every individual that you're talking to is where this is a problem we encounter a lot as trans people. And I know it's like it's similar to the fallacy of composition, but Ben used the ecological fallacy, and I use it almost every week, where it's like things that are true at a population level don't necessarily work when you try to apply them to individuals. And it's something we keep running into, where people think because this works in some context that it has to work in all contexts, and it just doesn't.
Right. I mean, you can still center the definition of biological sex on a species level around reproduction, but you could almost make the argument in reverse that you're erasing female biology when you deny the same biological mechanisms that produce the same phenotypic traits in a trans woman. And you say, well, that's not female biology. It's only gametes that are biology. There are only gametes that produce biological sex. Biological sex isn't a single trait. It's a multitude of traits that tend to align in one direction or another. It's polar, right? But it's not necessarily a binary in that aspect. So you could make the argument that, when the same exact biological mechanisms are happening in a trans woman, to deny that that's female biology, you're denying it's female biology in all women when, in order to prioritize gamete production, just to die on the hill of, we don't want to include these trans women. Again, you can center the definition of womanhood around reproduction, especially at a species level, and still expand the definition to include various forms of variations, the same way we do with intersex women. I mean, it's different variations, granted, but it still is a variation of the norm, carrying some male sex characteristics. So to deny it in someone who still is experiencing that female biology, to deny that that's female biology, that there's any aspect of them that's biologically female, I think just as easily erases female biology as someone who says that, there's no such thing as a biological female.
I think that's why we call this also the essentialist worldview, right? Like the biological essentialist, because they kind of think that that's all that matters. And part of this is actually kind of interestingly why I often will say that I'm not sure that, I feel like transsexual might be a technically more accurate term, because I feel like what's actually being transed is not my gender or my identity. That has been stable throughout all of this process. It has been my sex characteristics that have changed. And I know some trans women are very comfortable just saying I am female. And I feel like I sometimes struggle with that, not because I necessarily think it's wrong, because I think it's just more complicated than that. But I absolutely think it's fair to be there's lots of a lot of my biology is female, and maybe it's fair even to say that female is more accurate than male for me or something like that. But I think people want it. It's comfortable to have these hardline categories. Ben, sorry, you look like you wanted to jump in there too.
Oh, no, I agree with a lot of that. So.
Well, and you're ultimately saying that it's you're erasing the biology of the brain. I would say that's why I would consider it dehumanizing, because you're reducing all men and all women down to body parts and not acknowledging the part of the biology that, if someone did a brain transplant, took my brain out of my body and put someone else's in it, and then my brain was destroyed, I wouldn't consider myself to still exist. And if someone said that's still you because your body parts are all that matter, I find that to be pretty dehumanizing. I'd find that to be discounting the part of my biology that I actually experience myself through. So
that was so good. Mila, you just did the transporter argument and made it into a trans thing. I really like that. That was really good.
Some really good rhetoric today. I love it.
Well, and I think it's a really important concept to I don't think we have to necessarily fight gender critical ideology so much as we have to combat it with a real scientific and still there's no science without some form of ideology, but I think it's really important to kind of acknowledge those criticisms, but still create a framework that includes trans women, and aspects of female biology that addresses those concerns, but still, includes everyone, all variations of biological females. And I would say that, again, it's not like someone who produces sperm can produce eggs. It's not like someone who is biologically male can 100% change their sex the way a clownfish can. But, to discount any aspects of biological sex that do objectively, phenotypically produce sexually dimorphic traits, from male to female, that's when you start getting into, I think a lot of harmful policy where you're forcing people that look like women or perceived as women have the same anatomy that can be raped by a man. So I don't know if raped by a man. I don't know, but
You're right.
You're forcing them into men's spaces, men's prisons. I think there's important nuance that needs to be acknowledged there, and it can be done with acknowledging science in a way that affirms trans validity and identity, not necessarily, reduces everyone into body parts, in an objectifying way with like oversimplified biology.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate this conversation, Mila. I think we're gonna probably move on and take our next caller, but I thank you for calling in, and I got like 2 really good metaphors that I'm probably gonna keep in my back pocket for the future. So thank you so much for calling in.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too. Bye bye. All right. So that was a great call. The transporter argument as like a conveying the whole dehumanizing element of simplifying our biology down to our body, I think is so apt, because the skeptic community is so primed for the transporter argument. Fucking atheists love Star Trek. It is just like, it is in the code when you get your atheist card from whatever conspiratorial billionaire fits your bill. So I think I'll definitely try to use that in the future. Okay, so real quick, before we take your next calls, I am going to close the lines, I think, because we're almost at an hour and we've got 4 calls on, 1 more is being screened. So that's probably enough calls to last us the day. But we're going to talk about our poll for this week. Yeah. So look here. So yeah, you want to dive more into depth on this, Ben? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So this particular poll is meant to be more self-reflective for all of us, because I've been super burnt out, and I feel like a lot of other people have as well, just with everything going on. There's a lot to be overly stimulated by. There is a lot to be worried about, in all honesty. But there's also some time left where we don't know what's going to happen. And it's scary, for sure. But at the same time, there's not a lot for us to do about it right now, other than what we currently have, like what we have been doing and what we for sure will continue to be doing. But there's a lot of value in taking a step back and protecting yourself and what you need to be a human, to be alive. And there's a lot in the media as well that is intended to be exaggerated and sensationalized. Mm-hmm. And so while it's appropriate to plan ahead and to have like some caution with engaging in different things, like in anticipation of what's going to happen, you also have to engage with skepticism and understand that there are things being said that may not be true. There are some bad things that are being said that may not be true. And there's some time now that maybe a lot of us need to take more of a break and say, okay, I need to be well rested. I need to think about the things that are good in my life. I need to be around people in real life that I love, be around my pets that I love, do things that I love, because whatever hard stuff is going to happen, I can't do anything about that today. But what I can do is make sure that I'm ready to fight tomorrow. And I think people don't really always understand that in order to win the war, your troops need to be well rested. You need to have morale. You need to have community. You need to have a lot of things in order to win. And so on the one hand, like, there's this expectation that we're going to fight. And yeah, we're going to fight. But you can't fight so badly before the battle has even started that you lose the second you get to the front line. So there's a lot going on, but I want people to know that, like, it is important to take care of yourself too. It's important to prevent your own burnout and your own increased risk of further complications. And so just be careful out there. Be careful out there in the media. It's okay to take a step back. It's okay to like unplug for a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I kind of decreased my media consumption before the election happened, actually. I deleted Twitter probably like close to 6 months ago now. And honestly, that has been really helpful, because I found that, well, I love all my trans friends on Twitter. Every bill proposed was talked about on Twitter. Every bill thought of, like mentioned in passing as a potential bill, was talked about. And started to make me feel like things were, and don't get me wrong, things are bad. Not denying the state of things at all, but it makes things feel like they are worse than even they actually are. And I think like what Ben was saying is such a good point about, you know, your friends and people offline who love you and make you feel safe. Those are going to be the people who you ride out this with, no matter how bad it gets. And so I think, you know, really holding on to those people is going to be really meaningful over the next 4 years. The wedding I was away at over in November, at the end of November, beginning of December, those people are like truly family. Like I had so much fun that weekend. I did not think about trans news once during the weekend. I was not sad. I didn't feel out of place in that community. Even though there's no other trans people there, it was very queer. So I was like, I can be 100% me, but you know, I don't know. I think you have to look for those people in your life. And if you don't have them, I think you really should consider start getting engaged with like events that are local in your community, people that you can hang out with and see in real life. Because something we also talk about on the show a lot that I think is true to this feeling is this notion of like, when you're, even with like conservative people, when I'm talking to them in real life, they don't say the things or act on the things that they say they would online. In fact, most of them are quite pleasant and friendly on a like individual basis. Even the ones who know that I'm trans. And so I think it's like, not saying you have to be friends with those people. I'm just saying, I think being involved in your community, being a face that they see, and having a perspective on really where they're coming from and not just what is a very real portion of the population, which is, you know, the MAGA Republicans, the people that we spend a lot of time talking to on these shows who are like openly bigoted. Those people exist. Probably you have family with a lot of people like that. But I think it's helpful to be grounded in reality about these things and to protect your peace. I think what Ben's saying about, you know, having rested soldiers is spot on. You gotta take care of yourself. Let's see. How did our audience react to that? So, the poll results from the live chat right now, it looks like 45% of you said that your consumption decreased. That was the biggest group. 41% said it's the same. And 12% said it increased. And I think that's interesting. I think despite talking about, you know, decompressing, I would say notwithstanding the Twitter thing that happened a while ago, I would say my news consumption is about the same, but I'm trying to do a more diverse consumption of people, like broadly on the left politics, like listening to a lot of like establishment Dems and sort of center left Dems and like people like Hassan Piker who are like way on the far left, and kind of everyone in between. And I feel like that gives me a really good kind of grapple on what the resistance movement to the current administration, like where they are. And I'd be curious to see, I don't like the reasoning, because I could see a portion of the decrease people also just being like, I'm going to get back into it. It's probably going to increase in the new year. But like after the election, I was like taking several months off to just not even engage because I feel that I'm tired too. Well, with that said, I did close the lines. So if you're currently in the queue, don't drop. We're going to get to you. But we won't be having any new callers added to the queue. Thank you so much from Steph Helms for screening our calls. I really appreciate it. Somebody just said Hassan is not far left. And bro, I need you to have a reality check. Listen, I've liked a lot of things Hassan has said since the election, despite the fact that I've had problems with things he said previously. But pretend that he's not far left is wild to me. Okay, we have some callers to take. Let's talk to I guess maybe Crimson in Wisconsin. That could be an interesting conversation. So Crimson, pronouns he, him in Wisconsin, wants to know why trans men are left out of the sport/athletic discussion so often. So Crimson, you are live with Arden and Dr. Ben. Tell us what's going on.
All right. Hi. Can you hear me all right?
Yep. Coming through loud and clear.
Awesome. So a little context. For one, I was a trans youth and no regrets. Grew up functional and fine. Loved it. My parents were supportive. So I'm a success story in that regard. Sorry, so I'm a little nervous. It's my first time calling.
No worries.
But through childhood and growing up, part of my identity was the gym and working out, and how it shaped my body helped me kind of realize I was trans and realized, hey, I'm not just a buff femme, I'm actually a man. I need things done to help get that physique. And it's kind of like, as a trans guy and like in the bodybuilding and stuff, we're like never talked about. I outperformed my peers in middle school and high school. So it's like, you know, I was one of the dudes, and it's not, I was measured with the dudes, you know, it's like, there was no difference because my school was also pretty supportive. It was great, at least through my overseas education. But anyway, basically I'm just wondering, like, why are trans men never mentioned? We don't always win, but it's like, I know I'm not natural technically because I've been on T, so it's like, accepting that I'm part of the not natural category, even with like IMFB and stuff like that, like there's just no discussion at all. So I'm just kind of like, eh. And then of course on the flip side, trans women are just ruthlessly attacked, and I'm like, none of the trans girls I grew up with ever even wanted to touch a dumbbell, much less run anything. You know what I mean? Like they were more interested in games or art or something else. You know? So it's like so disproportionate, and I'm always like, I don't even like, even if I wanted to get like, I don't even know where to start. I just am basically like, I'm probably not allowed, and just kind of went with that and went my own independent way through fitness. But anyways, I love the show, and curious to know what both of y'all think.
Yeah, it's a very easy answer I have to this, and it's because trans men break the arguments that people are using to oppress trans women. Because if you oppose trans men, if you make a big deal about trans men, then you're putting trans men in women's categories, and that breaks their argument down. So they cannot simultaneously hold both like positions. It is inherently contradictory. So that's one of the main reasons. The other one is that like they just believe that if you were assigned female, you'll never be as good as men, and so it just, if you want to compete with the men, like whatever, you won't win. But even if you do win, they won't highlight it, because that again tells them that they're wrong, and they just don't like to be wrong. So
yeah, I think sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go for it.
Sorry, because I'm ADHD, so I like little chop by chop helps me understand. So, but like, so basically, it's literally just like pure hypocrisy, more like a socialization aspect. It's not even a matter of like, oh, they're taking synthetic hormones, so of course it's like not even a part of like the chemical makeup that for athletes.
Yeah,
it's literally just pure on just sexism and hypocrisy.
Yeah, because the argument against trans men, oftentimes like they'll use arguments about like synthetic hormones and stuff, but it's not with regard to sports. They don't care because they believe that trans men are inferior. And so if they let you think that they're getting an advantage by the hormones, that takes away the argument that they're inherently inferior. But what they do, they don't use it in sports. They use that argument to say, look at this poor little girl that's been told that she's actually a boy, and now she's ruined her perfect, beautiful body, which is so fucking horrible. Like, it's very cringy. Like, their argument hinges a lot on misogyny and pedophilia. Yeah, and so that's where they take those arguments.
I definitely noticed that too. And I definitely have noticed that too with fitness stuff, because it's like for like like one of my gym mottos is like, muscles look great on everybody, you know. So I'm definitely loving the increase of NBs I'm seeing in my gym too. But yeah, the idea of like there's this kind of like, especially with like female and femme-based training programs, it seems like it's more a matter of like, you know, promoting weakness, you know, less weight, you know, you can't lift as much. And though there are some structural issues, like structural differences, it's like when you see them try, definitely it's like a very thin line, if any, between like who can lift and what, you know. So it just seems like even like it was kind of like a little creepiness, kind of like how it's like, why do you want them to only lift 5s when these guys over here are being encouraged to lift 20? You know, like let them lift 15
want them to be weak.
Or, you know, try to encourage better for everybody, right?
Yeah, they want them to be weak. They want women to be weak.
I also think there's an element of this that is like the, you know, kind of back in like the beginning of the gay liberation movement. Well, like obviously, gay men and gay women were attacked throughout this sort of period while we were, you know, kind of being focused on in the media, much in the way that trans people are now. I think it's fair to say that gay men were probably attacked more often than women, broadly speaking, because I think gay men, for one, like men had more rights, broadly speaking. So I think gay men were kind of focused on, and since trans women are kind of lumped into that category, it is like they view us as men, so they give us like to some extent the attention of men and the like disgust factor of this notion of men rejecting their manliness and their masculinity and like turning into and even thriving in femininity and like all of the things that in aesthetics that kind of compared with that. So I think there's also like an element of they are more disgusted by trans women, and but like definitely I think they're both like relevant factors. Yeah, I just think that's also something that consumes a lot of these people's minds. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really I like your responses. I won't keep it too long, but that was kind of just one of the first questions I've always had floating in my head, even since first listening to JR's bit about it. It kind of just seemed like cool, but there was nothing on our, so it's always been a mystery. But I'll definitely let you get to other callers. I appreciate this. This is very exciting. Thank you so much, and I hope you all had great holidays.
Yeah, you too, Crimson. Thanks for calling, and we appreciate it.
Cheers. Have a wonderful day.
You as well. All right. Let's talk to Tara next. She's been on the line the longest, so I want to give her her shot. So, Tara in Texas, pronouns she, her, wants to ask where she can find information on facial feminization surgery for trans women. So, Tara, you are live on Transatlantic with Arden and Dr. Ben. What's going on?
Well, first off, I haven't called in over 2 years, so let me give Dr. Ben a congratulations from graduating from student to doctor.
Nice.
But I was curious. I called pretty much every clinic in the state of Arizona that could do male to female surgeries, but none of them offered voice feminization, and I can't really find any information about who does it. Is there like a site or a resource that I can use to find information?
So,
on
you're
that?
asking for voice feminization specifically?
Yes, because I can't find it anywhere.
Yeah, that's a lot harder one to find because it's a much riskier procedure. And involves a different type of surgeon to do, because that's through ENT, whereas everything else is through plastics. So finding that niche of an ENT specialist is very difficult, just because I think there are fewer of them. And you might, in that case, you're probably going to have to look outside your state, especially if you want a good one, because like you don't want to fuck around with like just whoever's in your area. Like you want, if you're getting that kind of procedure, like you need someone you really, really trust and really, really want to have it done by.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of risks that come with the surgery, and also there are several people for who the outcome results in them having their voices the same general pitch, because all that's going to happen is it's going to change your pitch. It's not going to affect the quality of your voice at all. And I think it's worth noting, Tara, that pitch is actually a very, very small portion of what the human brain interprets as feminine speech pattern when they're hearing it. It is a relevant factor for sure, but I think is more worth like what I've recommended to a lot of people, speech therapy, and like something that I found really useful. Granted, I have like singing trainings, but I would listen to the radio and try to find a woman whose voice kind of approached close enough to mine that I felt like I could emulate her. And then I would just try to say those lines over and over again. And once I kind of got the cadence of the speech down, I would then go to like a drive-through or something and test out saying my own words, on somebody who's never going to see me again. So if I sound horrible and they think I'm a total freak and a weirdo, like who cares? So I'm never going to see this person again. I think those things are probably going to be way more effective for you feeling comfortable with your voice long term than surgery. Like I was really insecure. Like I said, I have singing training. That was like my background. I was really nervous about how I was going to sound, and I had a lot of dysphoria about it. Well, I still have my moments. I will say by and large now, I don't really have that much dysphoria about my voice. And that was purely comes from like training and stretching your voice and working on your voice.
Yeah, because I mean, I've done like voice training and whatnot, but this is about the best I've gotten to, considering the fact that beforehand I sounded like I can make Darth Vader was on helium. So, I mean, I'm putting a lot of effort into it. It's just I get tired and lazy and just default, and then dysphoria kicks in and I go crazy.
And that's
Yeah.
where, like, and it's going to be a long time. Like, and that's something I think all of us, most of us, have like continued to modify our voices over time. Like, it's something that I'm still working on. I think a lot of us,
Which cis people also do, by the way.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah, and so I don't want you to think that surgery is going to be like an easier way to a goal, because it might, like, it inherently carries a lot more risk. And it's not saying it's off the table. Like, you need to make the decision that's right for you. But we're recommending something that's like, yeah, it takes longer and it's a lot more effort, but it is reversible. Like, voice training is reversible. And like pretty much risk-free. So as long as you're going to somebody who's reputable and not going to have you do problematic things for your voice. But like, yeah, and people in chat are mentioning different types of procedures that carry more or fewer risks. But either way, like, that's what I'm saying. Said, if you really, really want something like that, you need to maybe look outside of your state. You need to talk to surgeons. You need to talk to people who went to those surgeons. Like, you need to do a lot of homework before you commit to that, because it's probably even more of a long-term commitment, because it's whatever you do, you can't undo. So just like you need to make your own decision, but like, do lots and lots and lots and lots of homework before you get surgery.
All right. Yeah, because the one I found typically is called Wedler or something like that. I can't remember what it's called.
I don't know, but I haven't heard of a
Wendler
single
glottoplasty.
I haven't heard of a single surgeon who does the voice surgery that doesn't have a good handful of results who like really struggle because the outcome is not what they expected. So again, shouldn't be off the table. You have to decide what's right for you. But I'm very cautious against this voice surgery. And listen, girl, I get it. I wish I could be a soprano. There's so many musical theater roles that I would love to do if I could sing how I wish I could sing. But it's not worth not being able to sing or talk effectively at all if, that's going to be a potential outcome. So, like, you really gotta, I don't know. I would, granted, I don't know your story. I don't know how long you've been working at this. I would really try for several like years, honestly, to work hard at voice training before I would consider this surgery. And I
don't know if you've been doing voice training on your own or if you have like a speech therapist, but like, there's some really, really good speech therapists out there, and they can add a lot to like the training aspect of it. So I definitely recommend like getting a professional, especially if you're going to use money for something medical. That would be the direction I would take it first, like to find a really reputable speech therapist.
All right. I appreciate all of your help, and have a good day.
Best of luck to you, Tara. Talk to you later. Thanks for calling.
Thanks.
Yeah. Bye.
Yeah, that's a hard one. I definitely relate to Tara, and I spent so many hours researching that surgery myself and watching tons of results and talking to people, and I just ultimately came down to a scenario where I was like, I care too much about singing and music to risk getting myself in a situation where I lack control over my voice that I currently have. I know she's kind of gotten some heat, but Eden the doll was like an example of somebody who went and got voice surgery, and I think she has largely recovered. I don't know if she had an update, but I remember back right after, she had a really like raspy voice for a really long time, and like a really kind of like weak voice. Like it was hard for her to speak, is what it sounded like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's something that like, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer about certain things. And like for some people, it is the right move. Just
For
like
sure.
with bottom surgery, for some people, it's the right move. Like it's a case where you have to really think about the risks and the benefits, and you have to know that like those risks aren't impossible, or they're not, even for certain things, they're not like even unlikely. For some, they're very, very likely to happen. And even for a less likely risk, you have to think about the reality of living with those complications. Like, and that could be your life. And if you say that that is a risk that you are willing to take, that is your prerogative. You are allowed to do that. But you have to really understand that decision. And that's something that I'm thinking about with bottom surgery. I don't know if I'm ever going to get bottom surgery, in all honesty, because like as much as I want fallow, like there's complications where you could have to be catheter dependent forever, and I don't know if that's a risk that I'm willing to take with myself.
Yeah.
Like is it worth, like, and I don't know. So and that, again, it's everybody's own decision, and especially on a show like this, I'm going to err on the side of caution, because I don't want, the last thing I want, especially as a medical professional, is for somebody to take advice from a show and then be hurt by it. So
yeah.
I'm more cautious here even than off air, but I hope I didn't sound too harsh.
No, I don't think you did. And there are, I'm sure, some surgeons who have slightly better success rates, and definitely keep it on the table. But I would work a lot. I don't know how long Tara's been working at it. I would work for a really long time on this before I would resort to that. I honestly, to me, the voice surgery should kind of come in when, if you're voice training, you've maybe not been doing it completely correctly, and you've got like strain on your vocal cords, there's like a physical difficulty. That's where I feel like maybe it starts to become sensible to try to do that, because you need like physical help with like the structure of your throat and your vocal cords. I think also, like, Tara, you're already like kind of there, girl. I think you're a lot better off than maybe you feel you are, but I hear you. I have the dysphoria voice in my brain too. I get it. So anyway, thank you so much to that caller. We've got 3 more calls and we're going to take them all. So let's talk to Jack, him in Washington, who says, is there a danger in false hope after the election? So Jack, you're talking to Arden and Dr. Ben. Tell us what's going on. Where are you coming from on this?
Hey, Jack. Hey, Ben. Can you hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right. So, so I had called you a couple times in the past post-election, mostly with a lot of doom and gloom. So I figured I would call back, since I've been feeling a little bit more hopeful, because I feel like that part probably deserves to be shared too. But I wonder if you think I might be, having a bit of false hope with 2 things specifically. Sorry, I'm out of breath. I was just chasing my kids around.
No worries.
So with one of them is just the thought that Trump and his team are so like incompetent in some ways, but also like I'm kind of leaning on the whole like there's so many narcissists in the group that like it seems dysfunctional. So I have a little bit of hope that maybe they'll be too disorganized to do everything they want to do. I know that they're going to try real hard to do stuff, but I wonder if that might be a little bit of sand in the gears. And then, golly, can I remember the other one? There was one more, but I'll think about it while you give me your thoughts on that.
I don't think that there's false hope. I like, it's kind of, I know we have a regular chatter who may be in the live chat right now, who is very black-pilled on this and kind of wants us to be a little bit more aligned with them on that, because things really could go really badly. But I think it's worth noting that we've been in some really bad places historically with other civil rights issues, and I think that honestly inspires often a sort of new wave, a new generation of activism and organizing for our rights. And I think this could be the sort of thing that gives us a final push to really, fight for a candidate who's going to protect our rights. And these are the kind of things that often will help candidates win elections, when we can point to, like, listen, I don't know every word Trump has said, so there's a chance that he's out there talking about all these issues and it's just not making the news. That being said, Trump has been in the news a lot talking about trans people and the trans delusion and the trans madness and how we're only going to recognize two genders and yada yada yada. And he's not getting in the news, at least, talking about like housing costs or the cost of groceries. And this is the way we can turn the tide and push people towards an even more progressive politics in the US, I think, like a more leftist politics, by talking about he said he was going to do X, he said he was going to do Y, he said he was going to cap all credit card payments and all these sorts of things. And he's made all these sort of claims that could be considered like a sort of populist economic agenda, but he's not going to do that. What he's going to do is what he's already done, and he's going to give positions and power to his billionaire crony friends, and they're going to mutually benefit off of that. They're going to suppress competition and further entrench their power in the sort of oligarchic system that we live in currently. And I think that is an opportunity for us to talk about and get people hopeful and being they said they were going to do X, Y, and Z, but instead they're here talking about trans people. How many trans minors got surgery in the US over the last 5 years? Probably less than 100 total trans minors got surgery, right? In the last few years or whatever. And so I don't know, these are our opportunities for us to talk about things like this. This is where their focus is. This is where it's not. It's not on you. It's not on your wallet. It's not on your taxes. It's not on your dinner table. It's not on your gas prices. It's not on your home prices. It's not on the things that actually affect the American people. And this is absolutely, in my view, an opportunity for us to really turn the tide. And it's the only reason I haven't been super black-pilled, because there's a lot of reason to be concerned about what's coming down the pipeline. It's going to be hard. It's going to suck. And we don't even know the extent to which it's going to suck because he's not in office yet. And I think, I think there's a lot of room to be hopeful. But, you have to be cautiously optimistic. This is sort of when COVID is happening, don't be excessively fearful. Don't cause fear amongst your, peers and the people around you in your community. But also, don't think that the world is over and you need to, go start looting stores because it's the apocalypse or whatever. You can have a sort of grounded middle position. But sorry, I talked a lot, Ben. What do you think on false hope?
Oh, no problem. Yeah, I mean, I said a good bit during the poll and stuff. I don't think it's, especially what you're mentioning, Jack, I don't think that is false hope. I think that is a reasonable perspective to take, that, there are plenty of times where they've said really terrible things and have not gone through certain things just because they don't know how reality works. And again, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of things that they can do. But there's also a tendency to exaggerate from their side of things. And so I think it's reasonable to proceed with caution. It's definitely reasonable to plan for alternatives, to figure out, what is my emergency plan, all of that. That's appropriate. We all should at minimum, be contingency planning at the moment. However, again, I think that you have to maintain a little bit of hope. You have to find things that will keep you going forward, because in all honesty, there is there risk of there being a little bit of false hope? Yes. But here's the thing, self-fulfilling prophecies do have an extent of reality to them. Your psychology and how you approach situations do impact how you move forward. And for a lot of people, it's not it's not necessarily the fight of, am I going to save the world tomorrow? That's not a realistic thing to take. But if we're engaging in the fight of, am I going to be alive tomorrow? Sometimes you need a little bit of increased hope in order to win that battle, right? In order to be ready to face something in your own life. And like the people who are in athletics, people who are in like situations where they're fairly high stakes, even a lot of like social justice people, people that kind of push these boundaries here and there. Like you have to go into it with a little bit of confidence. You have to go in with the goal, not only with the goal to win, but with the intent to win, with the idea that I'm not going to stop until something happens. Because like if we go in saying, oh, well, I'm just going to try, but if I lose, whatever, I expect to lose, you're not going to perform like you're a winner. And like as cheesy as it sounds, like you need a little bit of that in order to accept some of that, like some of the resistance you're going to get in the process. Like if you're going to enter the boxing ring, you're going to get punched. And like the person who wins, they got punched several times, but they won. They took the blows and they won. And I'm not saying that you should intentionally put yourself in the line of fire, but somebody's going to have to. Somebody's going to take those blows, and there is going to be a winner at the end of it. And if we want to stand a fighting chance, we're going to have to push. We're going to have to push back. And we're going to have the confidence to say, I deserve this. And I'm not going to back down until we've made progress. And with that too, the second I think if we overly doomer, we risk pulling our own soldiers out of the fight, pulling ourselves out of the picture. It's like if we all take ourselves out of the fight, if we say it's like we're all going to lose, I can't go forward, then who's going to keep fighting? They are going to win, right? And like as sucky as it sounds, like there is a little bit that you have to hold on to. And I'm not saying that we have to be unreasonable or unrealistic completely, but some of those little things, the thought that, I could have a chance in this, is something that we should hold on to.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with what both of you said. And actually, that helped to remind me of the second hopefulness part that I have, which is that I feel like there's so much more trans representation now than there ever has been, and a lot more acceptance and inclusivity, even though, of course, we're still facing like massive fights. But it like that kind of makes me feel like, especially because, goddamn, in America we really value our freedoms, and I know on the right it seems to be freedom for me and none for you. But I feel like there are some, like for instance, my grandparents who like they fully believe that Trump's not going to come for trans people, doesn't want to harm trans people. Oh, he just wants to fix the economy, honey. But I feel like there are some of those people who, like, if they actually start enacting some of this like really, really bad stuff, like that, I don't know, they might be like, whoa, hold on a second, like that doesn't square with my America freedom stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's kind of what I was trying to get at too earlier with the whole, like, that's an opportunity for you to point out to your grandparents, like, what has he done to help you? What has he done to make your costs lower? What has he done to lower your taxes? But we can both point to this thing that he's done to attack trans people. So clearly his priorities are not in line with yours and what you expected out of him as a president. I think those are the ways you can impact people. But yeah, I think, I don't know. I'm pretty hopeful. I go back and forth because like every now and then we'll hear, oh, this person spoke on what the Trump administration wants to do on trans rights, and it's something really awful. And I'm like, well, now I'm going to have a bad day. But by and large, I think overall, I feel pretty hopeful. It's also worth noting, Jack, like looking back historically on a lot of like progressive movements for like civil liberties, you can find a lot of analogs to what's going on now where people will be like, oh, even more people report not being okay with trans minors having surgery. Or they'll say even more Americans think that your biological sex is what really counts at the end of the day. Like they have these polls. But if you go back on like the, you know, women's suffrage and for like the civil rights movement for people of color, like there's similar polls where it's like, you know, are Black people harming their cause by staging sit-ins at restaurants? And it's like, well, sure, of course, all the white people who have all the power think that that's a problem. Sure, of course, all the, you know, conservative Christian people think that denying biological sex is a problem because it undermines like the grip that they want to have on society and their worldview. Like, it just makes sense that these things are going to pull worse as we, you know, develop and make more progress broadly at our, and, you know, entrenching our presence in these spaces. And while I know there are some valid criticisms of people like Sarah McBride, I think she's a great example of being a present public face of trans people in the body of Congress that a lot of Americans are going to look to and be like, man, I'm really waiting for the hulking man with a beard and a pink tutu to come out that I was told is the representation of trans people, but it's just this lady. And I'm so confused, you know, like these things will make an impact. And really the defining factor is going to be how fascist Trump's regime wants to be. And like we said at the beginning, there's reason to believe that it'll be not great, pretty bad.
Right.
But also, I think it's worth noting that he has already run into problems trying to pass this like continuing resolution bill for funding for Congress. He's already running into problems that he has a razor thin margin in Congress, and he's not going to be able to do everything he wants to do. Not every cabinet pick he has is just going to magically float its way to the top like he thought. And so we now have a nice little window of 2 years where we can continue doing these autopsies of what happened. We can continue to try to reframe the conversation and get people motivated, and then hopefully do some really strong pushing in the midterms to change the body of Congress to undermine Trump's power even further. And then we have to think about how we get him out of office, because if we overturn things in the midterms and he doesn't get anything done, it's going to be a shitstorm, I'll tell you what, but it might be the shitstorm we need.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because what I was trying to tell my wife is that, like, it kind of feels like the dying thrashes of transphobia. It just feels like they're getting like the loudest right at the very end. And that was kind of the part I was wondering. I'm like, well, is that just me like wishing it would be better, and that's just what my brain's thinking? But like you said, like I think I'm taking it from historical fights for these civil rights and you know, basic human dignity that I feel like it goes this way. And also I feel like there was so much, you know, hoopla when gay marriage finally became legal. I remember my parents acted like it was the end of the world. You know, this whole country's going to hell in a handbasket. And then like the amount of like just out gay people that I've seen since then, that like it's not even as much. Of course, not to say it's not an issue, but it's become so much more accepted so quickly. I feel like as far as these type of things tend to go, that I'm hoping it's going to be similar. But yeah, I was just like I don't know if that's just me like hoping for the best, or actually just like, you know, putting pieces together of historical things. And I did love watching everything kind of fall apart around the continuing resolution. Of course, it's not fun that, you know, the government wouldn't be funded, but to see just the absolute disorganization was a little glimmer of hope.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also worth mentioning that, like, you know, the civil rights era was like, you know, between like the 50s to like the 70s, right? So we've had, you know, we kind of passed like the Civil Rights Act. I think that was in the 70s, like 50 years or so. And there's still lots of like institutional systemic racism and lots of cultural like white supremacy that exists. Like, even if we, in, you know, say like 8 years, halfway through the next president's term, or I guess that would be at the end of the next president's term, we've magically enshrined trans rights into the US Constitution or something awesome like that. I think it's worth noting that like we're still going to be dealing with like systemic oppression and bigotry till long after we're all gone, assuming there's no magical live forever, you know, medical interventions in the next few years. Yeah, it's just like, but we're making progress. We're fighting, and these are the kinds of things that motivate people. So, yeah,
Right.
stay hopeful. Hope is good. Hope is a good thing to hang on to.
Yeah, and if I could tack this to something that Ben had said previously about like real world connections with people and that making feel so much more like grounded and feeling better than like all the social media stuff. I have been taking a step back from social media in lots of ways, and I've started to take my kids more to like the park and the library and things, which I'm normally a little afraid to do because I'm like, oh, what if I run into a transphobe or something? But I've just kind of been like, you know what, screw it. If it happens, it happens. I'll deal with it when it happens. But for now, I'm just going to go enjoy myself. And so I took my kids to the library. I actually ended up making a friend with another dad who had kids about my kids' age, and come to find out that they're non-binary, and we're like, good friends now. So that's cool.
Nice.
And it just made me feel so much like more hopeful for like, oh yeah, real world is better than online world. And
sure.
Online, the hate gets like so much more attention and so much louder than other things. But if I could also give you an update based on our last conversation.
Yeah, go for it. Then we'll probably need to take the next call. But yeah, go for it. We'd love to hear what's going on.
Sure. So when we talked last, I had asked about whether or not my wife and I should pursue getting our birth certificates changed because we're kind of running low on funds after getting everything else done. And you encouraged me to, and so I looked into it again, and I was able to convince my wife that it was important enough to put the money into. And the irony of it all is that for hers, I just need to fill out some paperwork, have her fill out some paperwork, sign it, send like a $50 check, and then hers will get updated pretty quickly. Whereas mine, I'm going to have to like get a lawyer because it's out of state, and there's like pages and pages and doctors, like notarized doctor notes and all sorts of stuff that I'm not going to be able to get done this year. So I'm maybe going to get it next year or maybe not, but Trump will definitely be president while I'm trying to get that all taken care of. So I thought that was funny because I was the one that wanted to get it done, and my wife was giving me pushback, but hers is easy. So I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
And then, but that does make me feel a lot better for the safety of my kids because, like you had said, having as much congruent documents as possible is important. And so I'll have all mine except my birth certificate, and she'll have everything changed and correct. And so that makes me feel a lot better for my kids that if they do some weird kind of law where it's like grab everybody whose birth certificate doesn't match what they look like or whatever, something crazy.
Yeah.
At least I know that like my wife will be safe to take care of our kids, whatever happens to me. If
Absolutely.
like the worst of the worst, so.
It's a small thing, but it's like the cumulative of all of it is what really matters. And I'm glad that's giving you some security. I think it should. So, thanks for calling back, really Jack. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. I really appreciate all your support. And, I love listening in every week. And it's made me feel a lot better. That's for sure. So thank you both.
Yeah. Best of luck, Jack. Look forward to hearing from you again. Have a good day.
Thanks. All right. You too. Bye.
Bye. All right. How you feeling? We got 2 more calls left.
Yeah, we got it.
All right. Just a quick reminder that we are going to read all super chats of $5 or more. And if you include hashtag Team Arden or hashtag Team Ben, one of us will have to defend that either I think Baldur's Gate 3 is the best game in the world or that Ben thinks it's the worst. That's the opposite of what we both actually think. Not even the opposite, but just the most hyperbolized version. Yeah.
I know there are a lot of Baldur's Gate fans in the side chat. So
I know.
Get your votes in for Baldur's Gate. If you like Baldur's Gate, if you are a true Baldur's Gate fan, you'll vote Team Ben this week. Just saying. If you don't vote Team Ben, you're not a real Baldur's Gate fan. That is what I'm saying.
Yes, I did see somebody who thought that you... Yeah.
I'm going to know True Scotsman my way to win this.
I saw someone thinking that you were the one who didn't like Baldur's Gate 3 and giving you kind of grief for it. And I was like, oh no, that's me. It's me. I'm the one you want to hate on. All right. I have to run to the bathroom really quick, but I'm going to bring on Morgan for you to get started. And then I'll come back around. All right. So Morgan, him in New York wants to talk about the bathroom issue. So Morgan, why don't you set it up for us? What do you want to talk about?
Yeah.
I am transitioning. I'm trans male. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Arden just accidentally put her up on the big screen instead of me when she's the one to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I dread when I have to go to the bathroom in a public place, even though since I live in New York State, it's New York. The law is you can go whichever bathroom you identify, and you're fine. It's actually protected that you can. And but I dread it because I'm unfortunately large in the top regions, and binders only do so much, and I don't have a beard yet, and it's just awkward to go into the men's room when I still look more feminine than not, no matter what I do. But
yeah,
I don't feel comfortable going to the women's room either. And so
Yep.
it's sort of this
Yep.
hope they have a gender neutral bathroom.
Yeah, this is one where I totally empathize. Like that, I still feel nervous going in the men's room, even though I pass most of the time. So unfortunately, I don't have a lot of great solutions because it's going to keep being uncomfortable, and it's going to always be that way. And really, like, of course, the ideal situation, like you're saying, is to have a gender neutral bathroom, and they're not always available. So oftentimes I'm in a similar boat of I have to weigh in my head, is it worth staying and using one of these bathrooms, or do I just hold it until I go home? Or do I just leave the event? Or do I there's always that battle in your head.
I do
As
have
far
to say,
as
I've never no one has ever given me a hard time or anything. I've never had a problem when I really had to go and I ran into the men's room without thinking at it because I just had to go. You know?
Yeah, it's something that it's hard for me to give specific advice because at the end of the day, you're gonna have to pick what is the most comfortable scenario for you, and if it's more comfortable to use the men's room and deal with whatever possible harassment you might get, that is a risk of going into the men's room. But if that's more comfortable for you and you're more okay risking that, then that's probably your better option. However, if you find that, safety is more of a concern, you feel like you'd get less harassed in the women's bathroom, then that might be a better option. And unfortunately, if neither one of those are options, like my unfortunate answer in certain times has been I either wait until no one's in the bathroom, or I don't use those bathrooms. And like I wish I had a better answer, but it's just kind of you have to play the game and kind of make it what you will. Like if you have a friend with you, sometimes you can have a friend that goes in before you and make sure that there's nobody around. I have used that before. But there's not a lot of easy ways to get around that situation.
I also kind of wanted to ask if you have any thoughts about that in the broader picture. Like there's all these bathroom bills, and again, it's the same thing that someone earlier mentioned. They talk about trans women using the women's restroom. They don't ever talk about the other way around. And
yeah, because there's no good answer for any of it. Like, and that's the thing. I wish I could sit here and say that there is a good answer, but there isn't. There's always like, and even though we don't talk about trans men using the bathrooms, we have inherent like unsafe situations as well. Like we're caught in the same bind. And in fact, if you engage in the debate with a lot of gender criticals, which I'm sure like you probably have had this discussion before, a lot of those people will say, oh yeah, trans men just shouldn't use any bathroom. Like, and that is what they mean. So you do have to play that a little bit and strategize of what are you willing to have to confront in the middle of the day. And that's a choice you have to make for yourself.
I think my conclusion is if I ever start a business, I'm just going to do what the game shop I have has and have a picture of a dragon and a unicorn on the bathroom that says, whatever, just wash your hands.
I love those. I've seen those. That's really funny.
Yeah, and there are good businesses that are doing that. I think a lot of businesses are kind of heading in similar directions of just having, like, if you have a single person restroom, like, it does not need to be gendered. Like, nobody needs to care. But yeah, of course, we're talking about the big public bathrooms, and those can be inherently more risky.
I even think that, like, sex segregating the big public bathrooms is silly. There's a movie theater here in Austin that they have this big co-ed bathroom. It's like a hallway of like 25 stalls and sinks, and it's co-ed. Men and women go in there. And when I was in there, literally nobody cared. Nobody thought about anything. People went in and went pee, washed their hands, and left. Or, you know, most of them washed their hands. I'm assuming some of them don't, but people are weird that way. But yeah, like, it's the whole notion of a sex segregated bathroom is like so weird, especially if there's a stall. Like, I don't know. I do appreciate that sometimes, like, women want space where, like, men, you know, misogynistic men don't have access to or whatever, but, like, ultimately, I think if somebody has an agenda, they're going to act on that agenda anyway. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I think the solution, if people are worried about it, is to go to having the single stall or only or co-ed only bathrooms where there's nothing but single stalls. So that's my personal take. But thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I'm glad I'm not the only one who has had this issue.
Definitely not.
And I just wanted to bring it up because there's more to the bathroom issue. I guess what I wanted to bring up was just that there is more to it than just trans women using women's restrooms. There's also other sides, and everybody's need to be comfortable, if that makes sense.
Yeah, unfortunately, the people making those arguments do not care about trans men. And, like, that's, again, like, going back to previous calls, like, it's intentional because it breaks the arguments. And so, yeah, a lot of them have just gone to, well, then trans guys that was a choice that they decided to look like men, and they just shouldn't use the bathroom. And so, unfortunately, like, as much as I think you won't find much resistance on that in our community, but the greater societal discussion is it's a tall mountain to climb on that issue.
Well, thank you for talking to me. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too, Morgan.
Yeah, thanks for your call.
Bye. Alrighty, we have one caller left on the line today, and then we are moving on to your super chats. Don't forget, you can also buy our mugs, and that will count as a vote on your super chats. Either you're Leave Trans People the Fuck Alone or Support Healthcare Without Binaries mug. A purchase of those over the course of this show will count as a vote in that final tally. So, our last call for today is Barma, they, them, in Africa. It says, sex and gender binary is true. Is this biological essentialism? So, Barma, you are live on Transatlantic with Arden and Ben. Talk to us. What's going on?
Hello? Can you
Hello.
hear me?
Yep, coming through just fine.
Amazing. So I guess I've tried to call several times, but I generally arrive too late. So hopefully I managed to get in this time. And I guess you assume that my views, I generally believe in the gender binary. And I'm not very convinced, I guess, by the arguments that either gender or sex are not binary or are either a spectrum or bimodal, because I interacted with the different arguments for it. I'm not really convinced. I don't think they are sound. So that's mainly the thing that I'm interested in talking about, if you all are okay with that.
Yeah, I guess, like, how do you define a binary?
Binary, there are two categories that are separate from each other. So there is no overlap.
Okay, but what if there's a category that's not either of those two? And you said that, and you said that part of your definition is that a binary has no overlap. Is that what you said?
Yeah, the two categories don't overlap, but the two categories could contain each a certain objects that are identical. If that makes sense.
No, that doesn't.
No.
Oh, okay.
So how do you fit sex and or gender into that binary? In that way that you've defined binary.
Okay, we can start with sex, I guess. I guess the sex binary is very easy to define because if you use the gametes definition, I guess you know that one, obviously.
I do, Barma, and I have a question for you on that one.
Yes.
If somebody produces 0 gametes, what category are they?
They are not considered to have a biological sex.
How many categories is that, Barma? Barma, so how many categories is that? So they're not in either category, right?
Yeah.
Which category are they in, Barma?
They are not part of the two categories that are possible.
So I get it.
Not part of either. So that's a third category, right? That's not either of those two.
No. So Barma has the best workaround ever. It is, if your example doesn't fit into my model, it just doesn't count as a person. So I don't have to count it, and therefore my model holds. That's brilliant.
No. Yeah. No. Okay. If I may explain, obviously.
Please.
I guess that's a good way to mock my view, but it's a good one. Basically, what I'm trying to explain is that the category of the binary category of sex is only concerned when the characteristic is present. If the characteristic is absent, it doesn't matter for the binary categorization. I mean, we could take the case of...
so then you're saying, so Barma, by that definition, you are suggesting that some people do not fit into that binary definition. So there are some people that exist outside of that binary.
No, because, okay, if I may answer, it's because...
Barma, answer my question.
Okay.
We're going back to the same question. A person that has no gametes.
Yeah.
What sex are they?
They are not categorized as having a biological sex.
Okay, so if somebody is not categorized in the binary, what are they? How does your binary exist when somebody exists outside of your binary?
Your binary must necessarily have nothing to do with human beings. It has to do with the presence or absence of gametes or something. I'm trying to understand how this could hold, and it doesn't seem to make sense.
Yes, it's only a categorization related to gametes, not forcibly.
So, not to break this, but thanks for answering that. So if it only has to do with the presence or absence of gametes, then what do you do with somebody who has ovotestes? They have both.
Because that is a very good question. It's because the binary doesn't suffer for the presence of the two categories into one individual.
So, Barma, here's the problem. Here's the problem, okay. Barma. And I don't know if you know what you're saying. I think you're just copying the script of what gender criticals say, because you've changed your definition of binary every time we've given you an example that does not fit your definition. Do you notice that you're doing that?
I don't, but I can, if I can give an example through the binary used, the most common known with the 1 and the zeros. In computing.
Except we're not talking about computers. We're talking about biology, right? Biology is not a computer. Would you agree?
Yes, I agree. I just want some time to.
Okay, so why the fuck are we talking about computers?
I even think that the computer analogy is flawed, and that there are examples of where a state can get stuck between states. So it's even problematic on that thing. But I can give you, Barma, that there do exist true binaries where there are only one of two options. For example, God either exists or he does not. That is a true binary.
And you could even make a binary for gametes and say, like if you actually took the example of gametes are present or they are not, that is an acceptable binary. but then that doesn't give us a male-female binary. That gives us a gametes or not binary. But
Right.
that's not what you're suggesting here.
It's a fertile or not binary, or not even fertile. It just presence
it's just
of gametes.
Presence or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just explaining according to what I know about the definition.
And it sounds like you don't know a lot.
Yeah, this is the problem.
You're giving a scripted argument, and again, your definition is changing with every different example, which suggests that your definition is not consistent. And you came in here telling us that our arguments, or like our logic for a bimodal model of sex and gender, is like not logical and not sound. But you're not like, your argument is not logical or sound. So
okay, I think the problem is that when I'm trying to talk, you are kind of cutting me off.
So Barma, no, that's just not the fact at all. No. In fact, this is the problem with you. So this is the problem with the changing definitions thing, Barma, is that we're not here to help you refine your argument, right? Like, I can appreciate that just because we have counters to the things you're saying doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong. Great. But I'm not here to like coach you into your Steelman argument. That's your job to do. You got to come in here with the best version of your argument. And the problem is you keep saying things that are like objectively untrue or don't lead to the conclusion that you claim they lead to at all. And so we're jumping in not because we are just trying to be mean or like we're jumping in when there has been an irreconcilable flaw in what you're saying. There's no way after you say certain things that we jump in on that anything you say after the fact could fix it unless you were about to say, oh, actually, everything I just said was wrong. Here's my real argument.
Well, I feel like you are framing the discussion in such a way that therefore you will never accept, in my opinion, at least.
Okay, so no, Barma, I'm going to stop you now. If you're going to say that we will never accept it, you're full of shit. I've changed my position on this show over the course of 4 years on several issues quite significantly when significant evidence was presented to convince me. So fuck you for the assertion that I'm not going to change my mind or that I'm not going to accept your argument or your evidences. That's bullshit. You are failing to present an argument is what's happening here. And that's okay. I'm happy to have another discussion with you. But again, because you say something that is a bad argument and we interject, talk about it so we don't have to go all the way back to square one after you spend 5 minutes making the case, it's not like my problem. That's your problem. You're the one that has to bring the argument. Lots of people have brought arguments for biological essentialism on the channel that got to talk because they weren't saying like untrue things or making really poor arguments.
So basically, you think that the argument that sex is based on binary, if we use the gametes as characteristics, is wrong. It's not objectively
Yes,
true.
And we've demonstrated that with our argumentation. I feel like Barma, we need to, like, I feel like you need some lessons in formal logic is what the issue is here, because you made some claims, like gave us some premises, and the conclusion did not follow. Like when you make a logical argument, and Arden's better at explaining formal logic than I am.
Not much, but
it's like your premises, like the whole point is that your premises lead to the conclusion that you're giving. And the problem is your premises do not lead to your conclusion. You've had to change your premises every time because it did not lead to your conclusion. They're supposed
even
to be
notwithstanding the truthfulness of your premises, it is invalid in structure. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I want. It's because you brought out two counter arguments. One, which is the case of what if a person doesn't have the gametes?
Barma, your argument wasn't invalid because we brought out counter arguments. We brought out counter arguments because your argument is invalid. You got it completely backwards.
Okay. So,
like it's just wild that your argument now is that, oh, well, my argument would have been true if you weren't so good at debating. Like, isn't that the point though? Like we should be both like bringing our best arguments to the table, and then like the one that is the most persuasive as an argument is the one that wins the debate. Am I correct there?
That's true. And
So
I
shouldn't
guess
you
you
expect
want.
the arguments to be good?
I agree. I agree. You want to, for example,
Okay.
you would like a robust, logical, if possible, a formal logical argument, at least of my position, if possible. Not now, obviously, because we don't have to spend too much time if you don't accept my arguments as valid.
Well, it
and
doesn't
would
even
be a
need to
waste.
be formal. And also, we're not just it's just not a matter of whether or not we accept it. Like, it doesn't need to be formal logic, but like it informally at least needs to connect. Like the
Yes.
arguments
Okay.
the conclusion needs to be based on the arguments you're giving us. Like we should it should be something where we shouldn't have to, like, if your argument was true, if you had a good argument and your facts were true, you should just be able to lay that out on the table, and we should just be able to see that and say, yes, that makes sense, that's true, I'm on board. Like, you shouldn't have to do all this mental gymnastics changing your definitions. Like, we should just here's my definition of this is how it fits this definition. Based on this, here's my conclusion. And then if there were no counter arguments, and if that was valid and sound, we should be able to say, okay, that makes sense. We'll change our perspective. But we're bringing up the counter arguments to say, hey, this is why your argument is not true. And it's not us being mean to you in any way. That's just,
No,
you have to rethink your position. You have to rethink your position based on what we offered you.
I don't think you're being mean. I'm just trying to get the requirements that you want for the argument, because I
want your argument to be logical and lead to true information.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I say it's interesting to have a first contact, a first discussion, because I could still call later in other shows in the future, and if I have a better argument, I guess you would be satisfied by admitting that it is valid and sound, etc. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, and also just another question. For example, if I have a study, for example, that treats about basically my position, is there a way to get it in the call when I'm discussing, or it would be too complicated? I would obviously make the effort to show the court at the specific points, because I'm not asking you to read the paper at the moment where I'm calling, because it would be unfair. But at least I would point at the specific places, and if necessary, if you want, I can send it in advance in the chat.
Yeah, you can send it in the chat, or you can send it to my email, arden@qanaline.com. I mean, like, no promises I'm going to see it and read it, but if you send it to me, then that puts more pressure on me, right? I mean, if you come in and you're like, well, I sent it to you. So
it's also
you're
a good
free.
chance that we've seen it before, because a lot of this, especially based on the arguments that you've made, I'm fairly confident that we may have seen this particular.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure you've seen the argument. It's mainly you reject the binary because you think that, for example, if one defines that the binary is based on gametes, for example, people who don't have gametes and people who have both at the same time, admitting that those people exist, would be considered to violate the binary, because they would be two new categories, which would make it at least to 4, right? I guess.
Yeah, well, that is the criticism of what you've said so far. Yeah.
Okay. And just another thing. Do your definition of gender depends on the definition of sex, or do you think they are independent?
So I think there's a bit of a false dichotomy presented there. I don't think they're necessarily independent of sex. I don't think they're like orthogonal, like not related at all. I think they are not necessarily related to sex and biology, meaning like a woman being a female is not a necessary requirement. I think it's completely fair to say that 99% of people assigned female at birth end up identifying as women, or however you want to phrase that. So yeah, I don't really love the like dichotomy of like independent or dependent. But I'm very comfortable saying that they're very heavily correlated at the very least.
Yeah.
Then there is no relation of dependency, but there is a link between them. There is
sure.
At least some
a correlation. Yep.
And
a correlation. Okay, just another thing. Do you differentiate between words like male, female, man, woman, feminine, masculine? Because I think they are kind of different. Because the word man and woman, at least in my opinion, can lead to some ambiguity because it is both used sometimes as a synonym for female and male, or sometimes it's just used to refer to something related to gender in the sense of behavioral thing. Like when people say someone
Yeah.
is acting like a man, what they mean is, well, they're acting masculine, right? So I guess the word man and woman could be a bit ambiguous because it doesn't help put a clear separation between the two concepts.
So
Do you agree on that?
that's
at
where
least?
context matters, right? Like we use words in different
Right.
contexts, and we understand
Mhm.
based on context what they're referring to. And yes, that
I
is
agree.
a flaw in language, that it is ambiguous.
Mhm.
But it's and if you don't understand the context, or you don't understand how a word is being used in that particular context, you can bring it up in the conversation like, hey, this is confusing to me. Like, how are you using this term? That's why at the beginning of this conversation, I asked you to define binary so that we were going off of the
Right.
same definition. But like, think about it this way: in medicine, right? Like, if I'm making a generalized statement about women, it's
Yes.
implied. There's a lot of terms like implied by that statement, especially if you're using the term like women of childbearing age or something. If you're saying something related to pregnancy, people
Yeah.
understand that there are many, many, many women that cannot get pregnant. Right? There are many that do not have a uterus, whether that is a congenital issue or they had it removed for some reason, or they are
Mhm.
otherwise not able to reproduce. But just because like a medical paper is referring to like women and talking about contraception, that like the recommendation is for all people of this, like all women of this age to have contraception, we know that that's not directly referring to every single person because there are exceptions. Like
Mhm.
we understand that and that's a problem within medical language that I do think should change. Like I think papers should be more specific about what traits they're targeting. Like instead of saying studying women in this, like studying this particular subset of women under this particular context, and making it clear what they're studying and who their audience is, who their subject, like what the subject actually is. So yes, there is some ambiguity, but as far as do we need to have like this completely standardized set of lines between man, woman, male, female, etc.? No, because I think the rest of language doesn't work like that. The rest of language is a little bit ambiguous, and we
Mhm.
can't just overturn all of English as much as many of us may want to.
No, we don't need to do that. At the end of the day, since I myself I have some degree of interest in providing, in at least working with formal logical arguments, because I have interest in other things like ethics and some aspects of philosophy. I will actually spend some time into putting my argument into a formal logic and also natural language so that people can understand it regardless if they are trained in one or the other. And also so that people understand the validity and soundness because one would be just the translation of the other. I have also another thing to ask. Do you, I have a statement. You just tell me, you don't have forcibly to have maybe a clear view. You could maybe tell me you're not sure or if you disagree. For example, the fact that all, only females can be pregnant.
No, I
At
disagree.
least in our in the human
I
species. You
disagree
disagree.
again because of the
Okay.
fact that because sex is not binary, we have people who have traits that would include them into a male category, or at least somewhere in the middle, who have had unassisted pregnancies.
Dwyer
So
syndrome.
this is something that needs to be a case by case basis, where I don't think, and for the most part, like arguments that are absolutes are not going to be correct because there are almost
Yeah.
always exceptions.
I think, Barma, if I can, I think part of the problem I'm seeing here, and you can tell me if you think this is off the mark or whatever. You keep making these kind of like, you know, you're I'm not saying you were making an argument here. You were asking us our position on something, and that's fine. But there's kind of like an implication there of it seems like you're kind of coming from this perspective of like, it's fair to say that it is true of this, like, of a population. And this is kind of something we've talked about earlier on the show. We talk about a lot on the show in general. I think it's fair to say that humans, the population of us, are sexually dimorphic, and that generally speaking, the population of people who get pregnant are women, and or even, you could even say female, generally speaking, that population. But the problem is, is exactly what Ben is saying about these, you know, having these hard lines, because as soon as you zoom down into an individual, all of a sudden there are nuances in the case that make it not so clear that they're a female, or not so clear that they're a woman, or, you know, not so, like, what, you know, there's a lot of ways that these things start breaking down when you evaluate an individual person's, like, I don't think you could provide like necessary and sufficient conditions for like being a woman, or yeah, or even for a lot of these categories, for sure. But that,
I guess. Go on.
Sorry, I was just adding on. Then I'm happy to have you respond. And I think, you know, a lot of the times the response to that is sort of that this thought that by not having necessary and sufficient conditions for words, that all of a sudden these things are going to be meaningless. And I just don't think that's true. Like, it applies for all things. You know, the famous example trans people use is a chair. Like, you know, what is a chair? Oh, it typically has 4 legs and a place to sit and maybe a rest for your back. And then you can show them a picture of a horse with a saddle on it, and you're like, a chair. You know, like, it's really hard to get necessary and sufficient conditions for just about anything with language. And that is kind of like the difficulty of having these philosophical conversations. But sorry, go on, respond.
Okay, but you see, for example, the distinction in species, right? For example, if we compare a lion with, I don't know, whatever animals, maybe a wolf, we can agree that between the lion and the wolf, there will always be shared characteristics between the two species, such as fangs, claws, their fur, and all those stuff. But there is basically a relational network between the different characteristics that will make it in such a way that despite the similar characteristics, a lion is always a different species from a wolf, because it's not sufficient. If I agree with you that it's not sufficient to say that having this specific type of fangs or this specific type of pride.
But here's the problem, Barma. Your analogy has some flaws already. Your analogy has flaws because you're suggesting like an interspecies comparison, which is not analogous to the spectrum between male and female, because it's more analogous to like the delineation of like wolf versus dog. Like that's more of what we'd see, because there's a lot of overlap between like a wolf and a dog, but where do we draw the line with what makes a wolf and what makes a domesticated dog? Because if you think about it, a lot of the structures like that makeup that you'd say are male characteristics or female characteristics are initially the same structure, and they just develop differently over time based on different exposures and different genetic components, right? So it's not a fair assessment to say these are completely separate things and would not be able to coexist together or not be able to like function as the same species, because they are the same structures, just differently developed. And if you take the same exact person and put them under a different developmental scenario, like if you take somebody who grew up to be like, who was assigned female, grew up to be a cis woman, if you applied like testosterone, a high level of testosterone in utero, you can see some intersex changes. So it's not as separate as you want them to be, and I think that's a problem in your analogy.
Okay, but do you agree with the concept that there are, for example, female traits and male traits? for example, we can take because I think at least you tell me if you agree or disagree with this one. Is that, for example, if you take, I don't want to say, okay, I guess you don't care. For example, a penis is a male trait because it's more frequently found within males.
Okay, but what structure does it come from? There's a homologue in females. We have the same structure. It develops differently. It develops differently, but they are the same structure and would develop based on different environmental and genetic controls. So it's problematic for you to say that these are completely separate things. They are on the same spectrum of traits.
And I think
there are different variations of the same trait.
I think you're doing
and they're not mutually exclusive either. Barma, I think your problem too is you're suggesting that these traits are mutually exclusive, and they are not.
But
the presence of a penis does not mean the absence of female genitalia, right? They can exist together.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is that I feel like you're making a mistake in reasoning where you assume that there is a perfect. Maybe I'm wrong in assuming that a perfect gradient between the male genitalia.
No,
and the
we're not
genitalia.
suggesting it's perfect. I never said a perfect gradient. But here's the core of our arguments. Your argument says there's nobody outside of, there are no categories outside of the binary. My argument says there are categories outside of the binary, or at least there are examples of people outside of the binary. I don't need to provide a perfect gradient to already have my criteria met.
I also think the phylogenetic branch analogy and the male anatomy analogy is again an indication of the ecological fallacy that we were talking about earlier. Where yes, it's fair to say that on a population level there are traits about lions that make them distinct from wolves, but the problem is that phylogenetics is a population level analysis. There was no animal that birthed the first tiger, right? The tiger evolved as a population over time, the frequency of alleles in a genotype over time. And similarly, with the male and female genitals, where it's I would agree that at a population level, if I'm talking about males, I will probably reference a penis. But that's not to say that a penis is necessarily a male trait. It's this problem where you're assuming that things that are true at a population level are true of the individuals, and that the existence of the individuals doesn't break the essentialist overarching thing. But we're saying that yes, we can talk about the population level stuff because there's utility in that. It's useful for research and science. But it's not the case that applies all the time for every individual everywhere.
Okay, just some quick question, and then do you mind if we go into some ethical consideration about the gender topic? Or are you okay with that?
Here's my thing. You're the last caller, so you get a little more stretch time, but we have already been on this call for 15, 16 minutes. So I don't want to open up a whole new can of worms. I have enjoyed talking to you, so I do invite you to call back in the future. If this is directly related to your argument and kind of builds on it, then fair. But if you're kind of opening up a whole other side conversation, I'm going to say, why don't we table that for another day?
Yeah, but I guess it's kind of related, but it won't be I don't want a long answer. I just want to ask one question, and then you answer however you want, and it's all good. It's related to just the ethical consideration regarding the gender discussion. Do you think that there is ethically something? Sorry. I want to say that personally, I don't think that descriptive statements are prescriptive in any way, if that makes sense. For example,
Could you say that again?
For example,
I'm sorry, I didn't quite totally hear that. Could you say that statement again?
That descriptive statements cannot be considered to be prescriptive. For example, if you say someone is weaker than another person physically, it doesn't imply that in any way they are less valuable or anything of that kind. It's not a normative claim to make a descriptive claim. So I guess if, for example, I still maintain my position because I guess we have a disagreement that gender and sex are binary, I guess you don't assume that I'm making a normative claim. Or is there an ethical implication you think could be problematic in making such a statement?
I mean, I think there are ethical complications with asserting that gender is binary and essentialist. Absolutely. I do think you are making normative statements, and that's kind of my critique, is that I think normative statements are fine and have a lot of utility, but that when we try to categorize individual people by normative population level understandings, it is inherently going to fail. And almost every turn, it's going to cause complications for which there are no resolutions. And so I think when people try to assert that there is this hard way that we can look at gender, this very clear, correct way, I have a hard time taking that seriously, because I think a lot of gender is kind of the utility of the models that we use to describe and capture the data. And I think ours accounts for both the population and the individual, and yours ignores the individual for the sake of the population. And I think that's kind of where, that notwithstanding getting deep into the ethics, because we could do that, we don't have time to on this call today.
Obviously.
But yes, I think that's wherein we get into some of the ethical complications there.
Yeah, I'll just give you one example of where the ethics are bad. And I'm sorry, there's a neighbor dog barking. But the logic of the gender binary and that sex being equivalent to gender, one of the biggest ones, I'm sure, I'm not sure what your position on this is, based on your kind of takes with arguments, but that's how the arguments in favor of forced genital surgeries for babies, that's how it's justified. They say, well, we're defining your sex based on what your body is most similar to, and we're going to make you normal by operating on your genitals while you're a baby without your consent.
Oh, okay.
So there is danger. There is risk there are ethical problems with taking that approach, and a lot of it removes the autonomy of the individual.
Yeah, just to make sure, I know about these intersex readjustment surgeries that doctors were doing in the past, and I'm against it from an ethical standpoint, because at the end of the day, regardless of what is the normative view on gender classification that doctors have, as long as the trait is not a disadvantage to an individual in a, physical or anatomical sense, the social categories or even scientific categories shouldn't be a sufficient condition to apply treatment for plastic surgery or changes of that kind. I guess that's just.
So you're willing to forego your definition. You're willing to forego that for the individual. Yeah. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, not to forego it. It's just because I consider.
Now you're contradicting yourself. So now you're contradicting yourself.
I'm sorry. What did I?
Because you said because this whole time your argument has been that we have to keep the definition that applies to the most amount of people. We're going to keep the generalized definition. But then in this particular case, you said that generalized definition is not suitable to be used to do on non-consensual genital surgery on people that don't fit that definition. So in that case, you have said that the individual is more important than the normative definition. Am I mistaken in that?
I think you're mistaken. Maybe I poorly explained my point. But if I could give a quick example, for example, despite adhering to the concept of gender binary, and sex binary, I don't think that people who decide to transition are in any way Like there is no, we have no reason to go against it because the act of transitioning is not a scientific. It has nothing to do with the scientific description of the thing, if that makes sense. Just because, as we were talking about, for example,
I'm confused. I'm confused because I think I agree with your sentiment. I love your sentiments in that place. You are contradicting yourself. Your arguments are contradictory, and so I'm having trouble seeing where you're going.
To be honest, in order to avoid those contradictions, since we're using natural language and we're not being very formal, I wouldn't even deny that I might be doing some contradictory statement because I'm not forcibly tracking as if I was making a very formal argument. So I will get back to all those points for a next call and making sure that I get to those things if necessary to either fix it or to maintain the position by explaining why I don't think I was committing a contradiction. So I don't mind if you think I might be committing a contradiction, but if I'm not aware of it, I cannot, concede it, obviously.
I think what it sounds like to me, Barma, and then we can let this call go, and I do invite you to call back because I enjoyed this conversation. But it sounds to me like you're saying that like not applying the it sounds like your binary thing that's like a ontology statement about like what is sex, whereas how we treat the individual you're saying is like an ethical consideration that is not even giving deference to like the ontology of whether or not that person actually is a male or actually is a female. That's what it sounds like to me. Maybe you're trying to get at. So I don't think that it necessarily contradicts your philosophical position, like in an ontological sense about what actually is, to make a determination about like the ethics of how you treat an individual. But I do think it kind of gets into some of those implications, and that's kind of what Ben was talking about. So anyway, this was a good conversation. Please do call back. I did enjoy this conversation, but we do got to wrap it up. So thank you for calling, Barma. I'm glad you made it in. And call back again soon.
I will.
Okay. Have a nice day. Bye-bye. I will say, I've said this a lot on the show recently, and I want it to hold true for people who are listening. We did kind of jump on Barma early on because, they were making some... so they sounded almost like prescriptivist claims, like, this is what sex is or whatever. And that's fair if that was the direction that was going. Although, then something I really appreciate about Barma and that I want to have more conversations with people like Barma. And there's been a few callers like this, and I've called them out every time because I really want people in this category to feel safe calling in. If you maybe want to have some philosophical discussion about the nature of what is a woman and the ethics of treatment and yada, 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 great. And you fundamentally think that regardless of all that, like as a bodily autonomy, or, maybe you don't hold my same, ethical framework, but like to me, being trans is a bodily autonomy thing. I should have the right to express myself and convey my identity in the way that I feel best represents who I am. If you fundamentally respect that, those are the people I'm most interested in having a conversation with, because I think there's so much disagreement and, there's so much misinformation. And I think the conversations do get sort of drowned out by like the people who are like Matthew or who are like some of the other callers who fundamentally don't think that trans people are real, don't think we should have access to transition care, don't think we should be, treated with what we consider dignity and respect in society. And that is far more concerning to me than someone like Barma, who maybe has this notion of like biological essentialist view of sex, but fundamentally thinks that trans people should still have access to, healthcare to be themselves, whatever. I think those are the people I'm most interested in having conversations with on this show going forward. So
definitely.
Okay. We have super chats. We're going to read super chats. Any super chat of $5 or more, we'll read out live on air, and we are going to be starting that right freaking now.
And while we're reading super chats, if you have not bought one of the mugs yet, specifically mine, if you have not bought my mug yet, now's your time to do that before the end of the show, so it counts as a vote.
Okay, so I didn't plan this, but it's hilarious that my mug covers your face in this overlay.
I almost wish we were on StreamYard so you could make me the little guy at the bottom.
Oh my god, yes! If you guys didn't watch the holiday stream yesterday, it was so funny. We were trying to sort out the layout, and at one point Ben just became a little tiny dude in this little circle. All right.
That's so funny. I love it.
Let me check the difference in mug sales, and let me also close out Call in Studio. Thank you so much to Steph Helms for call screening. We're gonna get her on hopefully a host spot for like next month or something. Would like to. We appreciate all the work she does for us and the line and Bacchus, and it's been a while since she's been on, so I think you guys get to hear from her. All right, let's see. Where's my notes? So sorry, folks. I'm just kind of mumbling to fill the dead air. So there's no change in sales for Ben's mug, and I sold 5. But also, I posted about this on my Instagram, so I don't know how much this counts. And it was before the show, before we decided to do this, by the way. So it's not even me like trying to cheat or anything. But so I honestly, this is great for me because that means Ben might have to defend Baldur's Gate being the worst, which would be hilarious for me and would make the whole chat go fucking nuts because I can tell they are all on your side and not on my side at all.
Get your mugs, guys.
Get your mugs. Ben has a great mug. Go buy Ben's mug.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I get people like the like less safe for work ones, but come on, guys. It's a great one.
Yeah.
Everyone, yeah.
All right. Do you want to kick us off? Kick us off. Blah.
Let's do it. $9.99 from Rainbow Wolf. The right. Trans people are icky. Also the right. Let's put a pamper pirate in charge of the Department of Justice. There are 2 kinds of transphobes, billionaires and idiots. Check your bank account to see which one you are.
Pamper pirate? That is the worst term I've ever heard in my entire life.
Yeah. I know,
right? Another $9.99 from Rainbow Wolf. Funny how the same wealth class that includes the insurance execs is the same class that uses trans people as a boogeyman. Now, why would they do that? If trans people had their way, denied claims would equal 0. Yeah, the notion that trans people are influencing stuff is hilarious when Elon Musk has so thoroughly bought out this election that Republicans in Congress, as AOC put it, don't know who their daddy is. Trump says one thing and Elon says another, and they're like, we don't know what to do because we don't know who's actually in charge. But yeah, trans people are influencing everything for sure. Makes sense.
Again, get my mug and hold it up to your insurance company, and there you go.
Send them one.
$9.99. Yeah, send your insurance company a mug. It'd be great. $9.99 from XJWJC. Thanks for helping me understand trans issues after leaving the JW cult. It's been a journey with how controlling they are with the info we could consume about how we should feel about things. I'm glad that we've been really helpful for you. Thanks for the kind words.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to having more conversations. And I've been talking to other people too about trans issues and kind of how I approach this. And I feel like I'm ready to do a lot of growing in the next 4 years and how I approach things. And I think the show's going to be fucking killer by the end of it all. Or we're all going to be in prison. No in between. $9.99 from Sophie Dawson. How much do I have to pay to get a Line BG3 campaign? Hashtag Team Ben, hashtag look at the BG3, hashtag BG3 devs are God. You could not. Well, I was going to say you couldn't pay me enough, but there's a lot of things that I would say that you could definitely pay me enough to.
Oh, there's always a number.
There's always a number. Yeah.
I feel like the number is lower for Baldur's Gate than it would be for other things. So
depends, Sophie. What's your net worth? Answer me that, and then I'll answer you.
Wow. $10 from Tara Stoller. Sorry, Arden, I have to side with Ben on this one. Baldur's Gate 3 drastically raised the bar of RPG quality for me, which hasn't moved since Skyrim, and Larian is an amazing studio. Hashtag Team Ben. Hashtag Astarian Stan. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's the best game on the planet, but it is good, and I do think they did some good stuff, considering Wizards of the Coast have lost a lot of their fan base now. So it's a nice substitution in some ways for Wizards of the Coast.
Ben, you can be more full-throatedly in love. I'm not going to attack you over it today. It was mostly memes when I was going real hard on the BG3 bandwagon. I played it for half an hour and refunded it at Steam because I hated the first 30 minutes so much that I was like, I want my money back. I'm so mad. $4.99 from Louise Richardson. I think a demonstration game of backers all or volleyball with mixed teams, cis and cis teams.
I wonder if it's supposed to be basketball.
Yeah, I think it's basketball. I think there could be some interesting stuff there. I mean, we've already seen this. A lot of organizations already have rules and regulations for how trans women get to compete that often involve surgery and hormones and all of these things. You couldn't just do willy-nilly. You couldn't just do it to get an advantage, So, but yeah, I do think there could be some. It could be a really cool thing to be hey, we're the inclusive league or whatever.
Mm-hmm. $4.99 from Louise Richardson. That's nice. Trans and cis teams autocorrect changed it.
Yeah, gotcha. We figured it out.
Yeah.
50 pounds from Jackie Greenland, wishing everyone a great new year. It's bringing a new job for me, but without full-time transitioning a week before I start. So way less nerves than 6 years ago. So here's to everyone educating others on trans issues 2025, wherever they may be. Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to my hope for you guys in the UK, Jackie. I know things are in a lot of ways more dire over there. So lots of love to you. I'm so glad. Congrats on your new job. And I'm glad you're not as nervous as you were when you started transition.
$5 Canadian from Brianna Healy. Speaking of trans studies, have you considered reaching out to Jamie Dodger? He has a degree in transgender studies and a YouTube channel, #Team Arden. I feel like we've attempted.
Yes. I knew Katy had contact with him back when Katy was on regularly, and there was some issue. I mean, not to mention the fact that he's also in the UK, so I think
timing is rough.
Yeah, the timing is rough. You'd have to be kind of willing to stay up a little bit late, and not everyone's in the mood to debate when it's 10 p.m. where they are. So yeah, I would love to have him on. If Jamie wants to be on, if you guys watch Jamie and you want to comment, we'd love to see you on Tacos or something. That's great. I would love to work with him. But yeah, I do think we have asked before, and it didn't work out for whatever reason. But I like the work he does. Good guy, as far as I can tell. I don't know him personally.
Yeah.
$5 from Skip Toydias. I don't know if you've been playing the new season of Fortnite, but holy jumping Jehoshaphat's that fire Oni mask is forking OP. #teams next. Yes, I've been loving the new season of Fortnite. And this will get you into why I don't like BG3 as much, because I am very into competitive gameplay. And so I feel like BG3 BG3 is it's role play, right? You're in there for the story almost, I think. And not that the gameplay is necessarily bad, but I think people who love BG3 probably value the story slightly more. Yeah.
And I can't get into Fortnite because I'm one of the types that I will get overly competitive to the point that it will negatively impact the rest of my life. And so it's a health and safety concern that I do not play Fortnite. Because I feel like I would probably like it, but I would probably like it too much, and it would consume my entire identity.
That's good that you know that about yourself. Self-awareness.
$5 on Monkey Typewriter. Ben, are you getting obsessive about kidneys? If so, would it be accurate to call you team anal retentive, renal attentive? God, I'm dumb. We're getting started on the
I guess that's the point.
Today. Yeah. There we go.
Hashtag team anal retentive, renal retentive.
I just love that. I think it would be funny if people after this like just shortened it to hashtag team anal, and somehow people just knew it was mine. That would actually be really funny.
Also, I just realized I got to keep track of where the amount of mugs were when we started this, which was 57 and 5, so that when we get to the end, we can add those points together. Go get your mugs. Also, I just want to win. Thomas was in the lead, but I'm catching up to her, and Forrest is kind of close behind me as the second, and then Alyssa's right behind him. I'm second place right now. I think I can win, and if you don't make me win, you're a bigot. So I learned sentential, I don't know that word, logic, and made a proof for human sex binary. I can't read this. This is listen, I haven't done a logic course in a really long time. I know these symbols all mean something, and I can't read it. Waiting for someone to refute this. Hashtag Ben. I'll give you your team vote.
This is where it would be nice to have Katy around.
It's one of those things where I'm like, this is why I like the discussion, because like I kind of understand formal logic. I have a very introductory relationship to it from college, but like when you really get in with philosophers, they start pulling this shit out where they're like, you know, all of those symbols mean like a phrase that means something in philosophy, because philosophy is just like math with words or concepts, and it's I can't
but
follow.
The hashtag Ben, you know, just makes it great.
There you go.
Thank you for your vote. We tried. $5 from Pibblepunk, half dog, half canine. My doc wants to take the slow and steady approach with my hormones, but now I'm feeling a bit panicky about running out of time to do it legally. Don't take things into your own hands as much as you'd want to. It can be dangerous, and if they want to take a slow and steady, there is probably a good reason for them to want to do that, because there are risks with hormone therapy. Like, it is not like when people on the internet say that it's an easy medication to prescribe, that is not meant to be a statement. I mean, like, some people take it as a statement to mean that it's easy for anybody to DIY. That is not true. It is it is a fairly easy medication to prescribe as a prescriber. It is not easy to do on your own without any medical training. There's a lot of inherent risk. So I know, and here's the thing too, especially with hormones, like, there is a balance with negative feedback. And if you go too balls to the wall on your hormones initially, it can prevent optimal transition. So I don't know your particular case, but like, for my bros on testosterone, like, high levels of testosterone get converted to estrogen. So if you overdo it on your testosterone, you could be feminizing yourself. So like, you could have opposite effects on your transition. So I just want to say, like, I can't prevent people from doing what they're already going to do, but from my professional opinion, it would be worth it to listen to your healthcare team and do what they recommend. So
yeah.
And if you're not on the same page with their healthcare team, I know it's hard to find a new one for a lot of people, but if you don't have a therapeutic relationship with your healthcare team, it's worth looking for a different one.
So. Also, like, talk to your doctor, ask them what they think the realistic threat of this care, you know, being impacted is, because if you're paying out of pocket, I suspect it's probably not going to be quite as much of an issue. I think likely what the laws are going to impact,
it's going to be government funded.
Yes, it's things that are specifically government funded. So it might not actually impact you and where you're at right now. $4.99 from Robin Uchiha. Happy holidays. Specifically, trans rights. How far do you think they will go during Elon's term at this point with less support? Hashtag Team Arden. I mean, kind of like we were talking earlier to Jack, I suspect that there's quite a lot of incompetency. They have a razor thin margin in the House, so they're going to have to compromise. Also, like, Speaker Johnson has already been threatened with another speaker goose chase like we had after they ousted McCarthy because he compromised with the Democrats. But he has to. He has a razor thin margin. He can't pass anything without some Democrats being on board. So I think they will pass some stuff. It will get harder. It will get worse. But I suspect they're not going to be able to enact their worst impulses for the most part. Yeah. Did Coffee Mom? Sorry. It's a super chat. It's on the line. It's going to be a clarification, I think, on that last question.
$5 from Stina. I've worked for a federal hospital for 10 years, and they just recently started asking their patients their preferred pronouns. Why did it take this long? Because bureaucracy. And we all know that hospital administration does whatever they want because they have money.
Yeah. $5 Australian from Tammy B. Donation heart. Thank you so much, Tammy. We appreciate you.
$5 from Mr. Boricua 10. Hashtag Team Arden. Last night's stream was bloody awesome. I haven't that much that I'm guessing laughed that much that hard in a while. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Do this more often. I do like those. Like, I have to say, last night's stream was very therapeutic for me. And I genuinely, like, as much as I like being on here talking about more serious topics, sometimes, like, I just enjoy being on the stream with my friends, just existing, just being human. It was great. It was a great time.
Absolutely. I know Matt even had a little bit of insecurity, I think, because he like doesn't talk as much. It's a little bit, I shouldn't say insecurity, I'm kind of speaking on his behalf there, I guess, but like it's harder. He doesn't feel like he should interject as much as he does like on a normal show in that setting. And so he doesn't end up talking very much. And I was like, oh man, I think, I don't know. I think we were all steamrolling each other pretty hard last night. It's like the only way with 8 like host mentality people that you get your voice heard is by being like, I'm going to keep talking right now until somebody hears what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But no, I enjoyed it too. It was a lot of fun. Sorry, $9.99 from Balthazar 228. Funny how we never hear about trans men crushing gymnastics floor routines and gaining unfair advantages in men's sports. Getting 5th versus someone who didn't place in the next level is a skill issue. Yeah, I think that's a hit at Riley Gaines.
Yeah. $9.99 again from Balthazar 228. Also interesting how doctors are accused of pushing an agenda when the regular consequence of performing unneeded and unnecessary surgery are lawsuits, almost like they can't defend it in court. Yeah.
Yep. We've got $10 from The Rogue. This is Tara. I love all the support from the host and in chat. Everyone here has been a wonderful help. I will continue voice training before pursuing surgery. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. I think you have got a lot of there's so much you can do with training, and I realize sometimes it feels slow and like you're not making progress. But I have found with voice stuff, usually there are like plateaus. Like you get a lot of growth and then you plateau for a really long time. Yeah. And you let your voice get kind of adjusted to this new normal, and then you grow again and you change, and it's part of the journey. But I totally understand the frustration with being like, I want to be there and I'm over here and I don't like it.
£5 from Mystic Minds Analysis Tavern. What terrifies me the most is the Supreme Court declaring Trump above the law. We can't fight him in the state if the state shields him. Yep, there's definitely some things to be concerned about, for sure.
$199.99 from Gecko36. Thank you so much. That's incredibly generous. Love the work you're both doing to make the world a better place for my queer family. You're making a difference, and you are great role models for my trans triplets. I must pick, if I must pick, hashtag Team Arden and the Reptiles. Thank you so much, and thank you to you and your trans triplets. I don't know if they're like you're the parent or if you are one of the trans triplets, but that is a thing. They've done twin studies on trans kids, and just like with being gay, it is slightly more common to have like a sibling or a twin also be trans than like just like a random other person in the population. So because I know some people will hear trans triplets and be like, all of them are trans? Really? What are the odds of that? And it's actually quite a lot higher than you're making it sound like.
Yeah, like it suggests more biological components than people are willing to admit. $5 from Melatonin Ale. I got it right that time.
Yeah.
Hashtag Team Arden at a doctor appointment on mute, but gotta show support for my girl.
Thank you so much, Ale. I got to meet her at she came to a reptile expo. She actually lives in Texas and came to one of our reptile expos, and so that was really cool. All of a sudden I see one of Jimmy's Fuck the Shut Up shirts going down the aisle, and I was like, that looks familiar. Wait, that's from The Line. Who is that? And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. So thanks for showing up that day. It's nice to have met you. Is this from me?
Yeah.
$5 from 44 Turnips. Rare Arden L. Hashtag Team Ben. I'm sorry that you guys are.
We're gonna give Arden the L.
See, this is the way that your team comes back, is because my position is so unpopular, particularly in this audience. Look, I can't help it. It's not a good game, in my opinion, and stay mad.
Come on, let's show her, audience. Show her that she's wrong. $5 from Skeptoideus. Cardiology, neurology, and pulmonology. Those are boring normie ones. Nephrology or gastroenterology is where it's at. Hashtag Dr. Colorblend. That's a reference to, I saw some comments about how I coordinate my shirt with my background. But because I was the void last night and I'm blue today. So,
I did notice that. I was going to comment on it, but I didn't end up doing it. Yeah, I saw your green on green screen action.
Oh yeah, it was intentional. It was Jimmy was like, "Do you know you're doing that?" Like, yes, it's intentional.
$5 from Mark. Right-handed Sith. Wait, from Mark Right-handed Smith. Got it. Lazel is the only reason to want to play BG3. ESO is the way to go.
Okay, but you got to give me a vote. That doesn't count unless there's a hashtag.
I don't play ESO either.
Thanks for your opinion, but it's not helping our cause. $10 from Renegade Sapper. The dog is weighing in on how good Baldur's Gate is, okay? I wanted to call in to get Arden to talk about snakes, and she keeps saying she would rather talk about snakes. That being said, I'm obsessed with Baldur's Gate 3, so hashtag Team Ben, hashtag no true Scotsman. And as much as we love the snakes, I feel like a snake call isn't really the direction of the show.
No. This show is here for this reason. I want this show to not be needed, but I don't want to talk about snakes on this show because I'm carving it out so that we can have these conversations so that hopefully one day I can stop. Because they're happening, one way or another. Yeah. And another 5 from Renegade Sapper. Nobody wants to be paid attention to in a public bathroom. We all go in hoping we can only just pretend we're the only one in there. Hashtag Team Ben. There we go. Thanks, Renegade Sapper.
$5 from Monkey Typewriter. Sadly, I'm totally without hope for the future. I just hope I can keep my sense of humor. Been a long time. Since I Reich enrolled, I'm guessing.
I think there's a Nazi joke in there, but I don't get it.
Yeah. It'd be cooler if you had a vote in there for me, but
it would be cooler. 10 pounds from Samantha Patrick. Merry Christmas to everyone on the line, and Merry Christmas to all of you guys too. I hope you had a lovely holiday, or at least as good of one as you can have.
$5 from Larry Fishman. This feels so wrong, but I have to support one of my favorite games. Hashtag Team Ben. Here we go. Support for BG3. Let's keep it going, folks.
I'm the enlightened centrist, and I like to be attacked by both sides because that is the true position is always in the middle of every issue. So I'm attacked by the
Just think about how
haters of
funny it will
BG3.
be.
I'm attacked by the lovers.
Just think about how funny it will be to clip out Arden saying all these great things about BG3. Like, I would never get over it. It would be so funny.
It's my Christmas present to you guys.
Yeah, come on, let's make it happen.
$10 from Zach Lee, hashtag Team Dr. Ben. I've read the larynx hardens after a certain age and won't expand with T. I'm a singer and I'm 32. I'm afraid I'd be unhappy with my singing voice if I go on T, but I want T. Advice?
Yeah, there are a lot of components that factor into this decision. Yes, like after a certain age, you won't get as much like growth and as much like smooth transitioning, and you will have some limitations to your range more than likely. But a lot of that can kind of be overcome with work and with going back to voice training. And you just have to adapt to your instrument a little bit differently. Like you're essentially picking up a totally different instrument, and you need to be okay with continuing to work at it like you did for however many years you have so far with your natural voice. So that's a risk that you're going to have to take, because again, I can't guarantee you're going to have good results with that. But for me, I was okay like sacrificing some range for the fact that like I feel very happy in normal speech. I like my singing voice a lot more now. Like with the range that I currently have, I like it better than I ever had my previous one. So, and I'm still working on it too. So one thing though is like, don't stop singing, like keep working on it. Have a good vocal coach that understands how to work with a puberty voice. But in addition, whatever height you had in your endogenous puberty and whatever like chest size you have too, like not as in like cleavage size, but like your actual chest cavity size impacts the resonance of your sound. So just know that where a teenage cis boy would have like some room to get a deeper voice, we don't have that same potential because we've like our growth plates have closed. So just know that like there are some limitations, there are differences in where your voice is going to go. And you have to make that decision, but there are ways to work around the limitations that you get. So
excellent advice. See, this is why we have a doctor on the show. He understands things.
Yeah.
And now, I think this one's you. I read the last one.
This is me.
Yeah.
$10 from Pearl Lennon R1. Pearl and Nanner, I don't know. I have no idea. Remember that without Christmas, that Christmas without HRT is just Sismas.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I like that.
I'm not wishing you a Merry Sismas.
Yeah, I will never wish you a Merry Sismas. That's the real war on Christmas right there. £5 from Ian Roche. Feeling confused. I'm cis male, arrow ace, identify more queer than not. Some would accept me in the LGBTQIA+, and some won't. Am I queer? Discuss hashtag Team Dr. Ben.
Tying it up.
I feel like arrow ace people I would consider in the queer community. I consider queer to be anyone who is not straight and cisgender and like, I guess to that extent, allosexual. Like, I think if you are a part of like a gender or like sexual minority, you are queer. And I think there's, even to the extent that maybe it's like more debatable, I guess, to some people, the queerness of arrow ace people who are otherwise cis, like cisgender. I think you can start identifying with like queer culture at that point to a certain extent that like, I don't know, if you're friends with queer people, you understand queer issues, you're an advocate and an ally, like, I don't know. I give you the pass. You have your queer label identity pass. Go ahead and use it. You're welcome. I am the one who hands those out, by the way.
Yes, it's you. You are the one. $5 from Haley Geringer. Barma calls in to argue for the gender binary, but gives they them pronouns. What the fuck? Anyway, hashtag Team Arden.
Yeah, I will say somebody said they thought we were a little hostile to him right off the bat, and to the extent that we were, I was a little suspicious of somebody who calls in with they, them pronouns and wants to argue for the gender binary. Immediately to me, that's someone who is likely a troll and likely not serious. And I will appreciate that Barma came around, and I think we had a really good discussion, and I hope that they call back. But yeah, I hope that is a sincere belief that they hold, that they them pronouns are like something that they actually value, and it wasn't just an attempt at like a inclusivity joke or something. I don't know. Anyway. $5 from Larry Fishman for Carlock, #Team Ben, #Tiefling Muscle Mommy.
It's a BG3 reference.
I follow this cosplayer who is a super jacked woman, like absolutely ripped, and she has done a few Carlock cosplays, and so I get the Carlock reference in this case. I also just love tieflings. Tieflings are great.
Tieflings are great. Muscle mommies are great. Arden just didn't like the game. I bet Arden would like a D&D game if it was just PvP combat. Like, just take Theme D&D, make it Fortnite, maybe? I don't know.
Probably a little bit. I mean, yeah, the gameplay is most of where my criticisms rest. So I think I would enjoy the characters and the lore and the story. Although, well, I do care a lot more about the story than like I know Matt does and some other people. I do feel like I care more about the gameplay. I want the gameplay to be like enjoyable and interactive, and for me to feel like I'm like struggling and learning something and overcoming something. And I felt like I was struggling and learning and overcoming the entire system when I was playing, which is why I was like, I can't do this. I need my money back. I think this one's you, right?
It's me. Yeah, $5 from SJL, #Team Dr. Smegnog. Yeah, and if you want to know about the Smegnog thing, so where I even got that, there's this picture floating around with it was like a snowman, like glass drink dispenser, and but then it had like the little spout at the bottom of the snowman, and so that's where that comes from.
Horrifying.
Yeah,
absolutely
go watch
atrocious.
the special if you want to know about Smegnog.
Let me see. Okay. $5 from a Renegade, a sapper. I'm a cishet father of an MB/trans teenager, and this show has been instrumental for learning how to do the best for my kid. #Team Ben, moving the BG3 needle. Yeah, Ben is taking a solid lead. Maybe my mug sales will cop me a lead, but at the end. But as of right now, I think I'm getting creamed in this competition.
Yeah.
I'm glad we were able to be a good educational resource for you.
Yeah.
Even
better to educate Arden on BG3. $5 from Jax Takabi. #Team Ben, #transmask. There we go.
Trying to see if I can get the mugs tagged in. YouTube has like when you're watching the player in the bottom left corner.
Oh yeah.
I think on mobile, if I tag products, it'll like pop up tag products. So I'm trying to see if I can get those mugs.
Oh, nice.
Yes, tagged. That they'll pop up. There we go. Now it's saved. So if you haven't bought our mugs yet and you want to, now they should be popping up on the video player or below it for like I think on PC. So if you couldn't figure out where to go, linemerch.com, but also there. And I don't think I gave you your point for this one.
Nope.
Oh man, listen, I realize everyone is wrong about BG3. It's okay. I know you all experienced some mass psychosis that made you think it was a good game. It's all right. $5 for Monkey and Typewriter. Ben, you asked to be #Team Anal. You work on the internet, brother. What are you doing? Well, dig your own grave. #Team Anal is what Ben has asked for.
Hey, hold on. Like, y'all, I dug my own grave when I said smegnog on a live show.
True.
Okay. Like
Also-
I don't think Team Anal is getting much worse than saying smegnog.
Also, adding the doctor to that made me feel like it's like Dr. Pepper, and I'm like, are we gonna get bottled Dr. Smegnog now?
Oh no. It's like I can imagine that being like the off-brand eggnog somewhere.
Horrible.
So bad. Is this one me? Oh yeah, $5 from Sapphic Bibliophile. Watching Takis has become a much better ally to my trans partner without him having to continue to educate me himself. Thank you all so much. Yeah, and I love that you're saying this. I think that was one of the main reasons the show started. So
yeah, absolutely. That was a huge thing because Katie and I were both like, man, we get asked these questions a lot and people always want to talk about this topic. Like maybe we need to carve out a space for that, for this kind of exactly scenario. And I'm glad it's proved useful. So this is from Coffee Mom, I think clarifying on their earlier message. Let me see if I can find it again so I can like reference it.
Oh, there we go.
SX equals female and or male. It's not female and not male or male and not female. The single sex designation is the claim.
And there's no hashtag. There's no hashtag no vote.
No hashtag no vote. I'm so sorry, Coffee Mom. I will have to sit down with this and look at it later because I'm still not totally grasping. But the part of the problem is
like it's because they're saying that sex is female and or, so you can have both.
Yes, or
one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
So
no, that makes sense. Yeah, I do follow now. Yeah, it's the structure. Honestly, part of the reason I stopped like doing my philosophy classes, aside from the fact that in order to get it added to my degree, I had to wait until like 2 semesters passed before they offered the last class that I needed to get the credit. Aside from that stupid bullshit thing, I also have a really hard time keeping numbers in my head. Like, I don't know if it's like fully fledged dyscalculia, but like somebody can't read a math problem to me and expect me to solve it. It'll never happen. If I have pen and paper and I'm sitting down and I can like plot it all out, I can keep track of everything and do a good job. But like when people start giving me things like this for philosophy and it's a lot of like these symbols that mean something, I know what they mean and I know I could sort it out really easily, but I can't do it in my head. That's like my brain just shuts down and stops working. But thank you for the clarification and we appreciate your super chats. We have another one from Sapphic Bibliophile. Shit, forgot my hashtag team ban. Here, have some more monies. I am getting slaughtered. Slaughtered. There you go.
All right. 10 Australian from Tammy B. Can hosts help cherry blossoms in May? I don't.
Oh, is that a chatter? I feel like I've seen.
Oh, can we help cherry blossoms? Okay, yeah.
Okay.
I didn't see that.
Yes, this is a chatter. I've seen their name before. I don't know what we would need to help on. So if someone wants to tag me and help me understand, I mean, I can try to help to some capacity, but I don't know what I'm helping with, so I'm not gonna like make any promises. $10 from Domestic. Would you make distinctions between dignity and egotism? Can others have an effect on one's dignity? Hashtag Team Arden. I would have to double check what the definition of egotism is, because that is not exactly a term. Practice of talking or thinking about oneself excessively because of an undue sense of self-importance. Would you make a distinction between dignity and egotism? I'm not entirely sure what you're asking. So it seems like you're maybe asking something in the realm of like, can somebody really dehumanize you because you make your own dignity sort of thing is what I'm kind of getting maybe. And I would say like, yeah, absolutely you can. And I feel like the only people who don't think that are people who come from excessive privilege. Like I definitely agree. Like you have to make your own self-worth, and you can't necessarily count on anyone to like do the heavy lifting of your self-value for you. That said, humans are a social species. We very much need and depend on affirmation and community engagement. So, yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah. I mean, with this one, like, think about decisions that are made after a person dies. There are easily ways to dehumanize somebody when they are not able to control their own dignity on their own. Like how you treat a trans person after they die is something that affects their dignity and dehumanizes them without them being able to do anything about it.
And I'm seeing people say that mods have covered the situation with cherry blossoms. Yeah, okay. I thought I've heard your name before, but I usually y'all will call in with like an actual name or a different pseudonym, and then you have one in chat. So I don't always remember. That was it. Okay, good. I'm glad we got close to the point. Domestic. This one's you. Sorry.
$5 from. I'm gonna be forever perplexing this name. Perlaner one. I'm gonna say it differently. I'm gonna say it differently every time just because I can. Forgot to add hashtag Team Ben. Thank you. I appreciate your vote, and I will continue to pronounce your name differently every single time until I figure it out. Just trying out different ways of reading it.
$5 from Mark Right-Handed Sith Smith. Hashtag Team Arden. Have you ever met Aron Ra? He's also a big Snake fan. Yeah, I'm good friends with Aron. Actually, we know each other. In we go to Snake Expos and stuff together from time to time. Aron is a great guy. I really like him, and always appreciate having him around. He has a good collection. I love a lot of his animals. I also appreciate that he is not breeding, so he has a lot more time to like socialize his animals, and he takes them out a lot and like gets other people to handle his snakes at like pubs and stuff. And I think that is such a cool thing to do because it really like normalizes reptiles and snakes in particular, and to be like, oh, like you can treat this like a dog, like you can just bring it to the bar and sit outside and kind of thing. And I hope that's how people start to think of reptiles. So yeah, I love Aron. He's great.
$5 from Pibblepunk, half dog, half canine. Would a corn snake or BP be a better recommendation for a first-time snake owner, or a third option if you've got one? Hashtag Team Arden. I figured I'm not appropriate for this question.
So it's kind of complicated. Just to be really quick with it, personally, I think ball pythons are the best starter pet. Part of the reason they might not be considered one is because they have slightly higher husbandry requirements. That is like the conditions that they need to live in. They need slightly higher humidity than corn snakes. Corn snakes live in North America, so they can really adapt to pretty much any conditions in a house inside in North America without much effort. They're both great behaviorally. I just think corn snakes are more active. And I personally think it's easier to handle a snake that's active and mobile if you've been able to work with a snake that is just kind of hanging out. I feel like it gets you more comfortable with how they move and where they're likely to go and what kind of things to expect for a starter. But if somebody got a corn snake to start, I bet you they would have a great experience. They're awesome animals. House snakes, hognose snakes, are probably some of my other go-to intro snakes. Yeah. I think I don't like hogs quite as much because hogs don't handle very well. Hogs are terrestrial and they want to be on the ground. They're always trying to get on the ground. But a corn snake, ball python, and like house snakes, they tend to be semi-arboreal. So they are much more comfortable propping themselves up in your hand while you're handling them. That is why I don't put corn snakes as a good first-time one, but they're really well behaved. They're cute. They're fun. If you don't feel the need to handle your snake all the time, hogs can be an awesome first pet.
I think this one's you.
Oh, right. You read the last one. I just answered. Sorry. 5 Australian dogs from Raven Lunatic. Hope everyone enjoyed the holidays. Hashtag Team Ben. Thank
All
you
the
so
BG3
much.
fans.
For real. They're coming out for you.
$5 from Aaron C. This is my favorite show of the week. That's all. Hashtag Team Dr. Ben. I appreciate it. All these BG3 fans. You just got to appeal to the masses. That's how we win this game.
Apparently.
And Arden has too many controversial opinions, so
I am, a fan of controversy. I just love being a naysayer. $5 from Dave Murphy. Hashtag excuse me. Just because I wear a Joker hoodie doesn't mean I believe Batman is real. Hashtag go fuck yourself, Jimmy. Hashtag Jimmy Snow has a podcast. Hell yeah. Go fuck yourself, Jimmy.
$5 from Dade Murphy. Hashtag excuse me. Hashtag Team Arden.
Thank you so much. Did I say excuse me today? Is that why that's being like focused in on?
I don't know, maybe.
Because I do kind of feel like excuse me is such a power move. Excuse me, but you said this. I'm gonna start doing that either way.
$5 from Skeptoideus. Bought my Arden mug. BG3 is mid at best. ESO is greater than BG3. Hashtag I said what I said. Hashtag Team Smegnog. In all fairness,
but then
I'm
you
not
gave
saying it's the best. And then you gave it to me. Yeah. You bought the Arden mug. Oh, Skeptoideus is being a fence sitter because the Arden mug, unless you got the Arden mug before the stream.
I assume.
But either way, I'm not claiming that BG3 is the best game ever. But it is a decent game. I don't think it's terrible. I would say it's a good game.
Look, a lot of people think it's a good game. It won awards. It's fair to say that apparently I just don't think like everyone else, and I am the odd one out on this, and that's fine. But I'm also correct.
But I also play Airport X-Ray Simulator. Which is a newly released game. It's also a great game.
That's so indicative of our different standards for how we value games, because like my games I'm playing right now, Marvel Rivals, Fortnite, I'm playing PoE 2. These are the kind of games that I like. Yeah, we have very, very different tastes.
I play BG3, I play The Sims 4, I play all the simulation games. Like I played Farming Sim. I'm playing like a Ships at Sea game, which is a sim. Like I play almost exclusively sim games. So yeah, BG3 is basically kind of a sim game. It's like Dungeons and Dragons simulator almost.
I don't think I gave you your point for that one. Also, somebody in the chat is like, "Oh, what about California king snakes?" I love it every time I have to. Somebody's like, what in your opinion is the best starter snake?" And I explain it. And then somebody's like, "Well, what about the snake that I had first that I really like?" Like, Cali king snakes are great snakes. Some of the even like more difficult to keep snakes can be great snakes for a first time keeper. Like there's a learning curve, but you'll figure it out, and then everything is easy for you after that. But California king snakes are slightly more inclined to be defensive or food motivated, especially when they're young. And I think that can sometimes be off-putting to people when they're getting used to a snake, to have a snake that is inclined to maybe bite them, even if their bites don't hurt because they're so goddamn tiny, their mouths can't do anything to you. Like, ball pythons are just so mellow. It's a really good way to get people comfortable with the presence of a snake without feeling like you need to, like, beware around it to some capacity. $5 from Renegade Sapper. Just bought your mug. Next year, it needs to say Dr. Venus's special fluid receptacle. Hashtag Team Arden. Just to balance out my ballot stuffing. I mean, we did Dr. Venus on your last year's holiday mug. It was like the Dr. Venus Go juice or something, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe we'll bring it back around. But Dr. Venus has already been on a mug. The last year's holiday competition. And then potentially the last super chat of the night. And you get to say this name again.
From Pearl and one. No problem, Doctor. Hashtag Team Ben.
All right.
Oh, and we did miss the one a couple ago. I think we had it up and just didn't read it. From Aaron C. With the chameleon.
Oh,
What is that?
it's a bearded dragon. But yes, I did.
Bearded
I gave you the point for this.
Oh yeah,
but we didn't read it. Yeah, I saw
but
the
we didn't
hashtag
read it.
Team Smegnog. $5 from Aaron C. I know nothing about Baldur's Gate. I just like to hear Arden talk. Fair enough. Honestly, that's fair enough. We just got two
We
more
gotta go to
in.
and then we'll have to go to the mugs. See how the mugs are doing.
Yes, we'll add those mug points in. Go for it.
5 Australian from Raven Lunatic. Just wanted to show support to the transatlantic show by buying either an Arden or Ben mug, but I couldn't go past the Forrest mug. Hashtag Team Dr. Ben. Congrats, Forrest, I guess, but I still got the vote, so we're good.
Listen, I as far as design goes, I was the most happy with the final product of Forrest. I felt like that felt like a design that I would like be like, yeah, I did that. A lot of the other ones are fine. There's nothing wrong with them. I just, if I had more time,
They just want to win. Yeah.
I would have like done a lot more like feedback with the people who it's representing and see what they like and what they didn't like and edit it. And, you know, I think it would have been a more refined final product, but
I know next year it's just going to be, this is my Smegnog mug, and that's that's what it's going to say on it.
Disgusting.
Next year.
Like how this year you were like, I want to go for a broad appeal so anyone can have my mug, and next year you're like, I want my mug to have Smegnog on it.
Well, because the broad appeal's not working. That's what I'm learning. The broad appeal isn't working.
Fair.
So I have to re-strategize with Smegnog. You're welcome.
$5 from Pibblepunk, half dog, half canine. Shout out to DA Veilguard. It sounds like a game thrilled with all the rep, but also they made combat actually fun. I have a crush on 6 out of the 7 main characters. I don't know what DA Veilguard is, but right on.
$5 from Zerith Moonpaw. Sorry I'm late. I done died dead. Hashtag Dr. Ben.
Wow.
I hope you're alive
Tragic.
now.
All right.
Thanks for joining us.
We're going to stop the super chat counting now. So I can go check on the mugs and we'll add those points to the tally. I think it would have to be pretty fucking huge for me to overturn what Ben's got here. So I'm not too hopeful. But yeah, I got one vote extra out of the last like few hours of. Thanks, guys. Thanks for showing up for me. Oh, wait, no, I give that to you. That's 25. I'm this one. And let's see where Ben's is. Guys, go buy Ben's mug. Ben has a great mug. You should have, there should be way more of them. And Ben got 1 point out of that. So. All right.
Go get your mugs. Use them everywhere. Get them for your teachers. Get them for your insurance agents.
Use them for your Smegnog.
Use it for go drink some Smegnog out of it. Yeah.
All right. So I gotta get this little banner thing up and ready. Real quick here. Make sure Ben is the winner of this week, and the topic is BG3 is the best game. Best game of all time. Let's get real dramatic with it. Okay, I am ready. If chat is ready.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Oh, no, that's right. Sorry, I got confused by the banner, so I stopped. Try that again. Hold on, everyone. Stop the presses. We're getting there, okay? Okay, hold on. All right. Powering up the clock now. In 3, 2, 1. All right, so I know what you may be thinking. I could play a game with gameplay that is very accessible, with camera angles that make sense, with cameras that move efficiently, and that would be cool. But what if I played the best game of all time, Baldur's Gate 3, a game that has a very cumbersome camera and movement system, that has a fun, nice, slow-paced combat system, because that's what I like, and that's what should be popular, is combat systems that are slow and mellow, so that we can all just kind of hang out while it's happening. And I could value, like the complexity of like more integrated combat systems, things that are a little bit more fast. But I could also just value like hot muscle mommies with horns. And I think honestly, that's valid. I mean, you know, the queer community really has been denied hot muscle mommies with horns for far too long. And I think that the how integrated the queer community is with the BG3 community is really beautiful that we got that present for us. And, you know, you can be so inclusive with your character and who you love and make out with. And it's listen, I'm not... there is a lot of value in Baldur's Gate 3 that I think is untapped by people who are naysayers about the game and the quality. I mean, it won awards, so that means objectively that it has to be a good game, right? If people like it, and lots of people like it, then that means it's good. And that is the... I think that is the most compelling argument. Yes, thank you, Sparrow the Sissy. Cozy weirdo dating sims for the win. I couldn't have summed up the argument for BG3 better. Cozy weirdo dating sims for the win. Okay, guys, I'm not gonna lie, that was the hardest one I've ever done. That was actually painful for me.
That's why I
At one point,
it.
I almost started shit talking, and I was like, "No, I can't. I have to spin this as a positive thing." Passive aggressive advertising. Yes, I know. In respect for losing the competition, I won't get into all of the correct reasons that I have for why it is objectively not a good game, but that's okay. We don't have to do that today. I don't need to win every time because I win at life. Well, that's our show, folks. Call back next week. Buy our mugs. You should buy my mug in particular. Buy Ben's mug too, but like buy my mug, you know. Patreon.com/call the line. Anyway, bye. If you want to support the line and get your name scrolling up the side here, like these lovely patron producers, you go to patreon.com/call the line. We are getting more active with our patron exclusive content coming in the new year. We're talking about more episodes of Live on the Line, maybe more of those private Q&A sessions that we do. So yeah, stick around, help support the line, and we will see you all next week. Bye, losers.